This is part 4 of the Spirit Child, Tessa Lamar novels, Book 3. Written by Kathryn M. Hearst. Narrated by Holly Adams. Be sure to subscribe to Kathryn's channel where you can find more of Kathryn's paranormal and contemporary romance novels.
Chapter 38. I sat on the edge of the bed reading the second Harry Potter novel to Jolene. Bryson and I had searched the internet for age-appropriate stories without any subjects that could possibly trigger the girl or the spirit haunting her. Not an easy task. I'd fretted over reading her the story of an orphaned boy with magical powers, but she seemed to connect to the main character, despite her preference for stories about girls. "Finish your tea." Bryson motioned to the mug on her nightstand. I sent up a prayer to ask forgiveness for drugging the child. The very idea made me queasy, but we needed to speak to Christina without scaring the bejesus out of Jolene. She finished the honey-laden drink and handed me the cup. "Go brush your teeth and use the bathroom one more time." I saved our place with the bookmark she'd made with Bryson. "Yes, ma'am." I shot Bryson a dirty look. "I hate this." He leaned close and whispered, "Think of it like anesthesia before an operation." "I guess." Jolene returned and crawled under the covers. Once settled, she lifted her arms to me and Bryson. "Hugs and prayers?" I embraced her, and Bryson wrapped his arms around both of us. Squished between us, Jolene said, "Dear God, thank you for a good day. Please watch over Grandma, Aunt Dottie, TJ, little Aiden Scott, Mrs. White, Dr. A, Miss Haley, Tessa, and Bryson. Please tell my mama I love her and to come see me soon. I miss her. Amen." "Amen," Bryson and I repeated. "Oh, and God, thank you for giving me a new family. And please watch over my angel Christina and Mr. Aaron too. Amen." My throat tightened. I hadn't thought it possible to love her any more than I already did, but I'd thought wrong. "Amen." Bryson stood and kissed her brow. "One more thing, God. I'd like it very much if you'd see fit to ask Grandma to make chicken and dumplings again." I pulled her quilt to her chin. "Good night, sweet girl." "Good night." Yawning, she rolled to her side. Bryson closed the bedroom door behind us and walked to the front porch. We'd hear her if she needed us, but we stood a much better chance at privacy outside than in the kitchen. She steals my heart a little more every day. I sat on the porch swing. "I think she locked mine up whole the first day." He gave me a whisper of a kiss. "Are you sure about this?" We'd planned the spell that morning. We'd gone over the steps and the questions we needed answered. Bryson had drawn a semicircle around the head and one side of Jolene's bed while she was in the shower. We were ready, but fear made me second-guess our plan. I knew what to do, but I had no idea what to expect. "I'm sure the blessed grave dirt and herbs from Pete will keep the spirit from entering Jojo's body. Buy me some time to close the circle." I tried to keep my expression neutral, but my voice quivered. "Should we make sure she's asleep?" "She's out. Do it." He hopped over the porch railing and headed for the back door. I drew a breath to center myself. I can do this. She's a kid, a 15-year-old dead girl with an affinity for sharp objects, but a girl nonetheless. I quieted the firebird and focused on the other half of my magic, the cold side that allowed me to communicate with the dead. Christina, are you here? We need to talk. I put my hands on my knees to keep them from bouncing. Christina, please, it's important. I need to talk to you about Jolene. What about her? The ghost appeared a few feet in front of me. My job was to stall the spirit. I'd intended to speak to her about the incident with the social worker and reassure her we hadn't invited Aaron inside. Instead, I went with what I hoped was a safer topic. What would you say if Bryson and I adopted her? You broke your promise. She folded her arms. My least favorite scent, Love's Baby Soft, washed over me. Actually, I didn't. He showed up uninvited and I told him to leave. The girl's glare could have eaten the paint off a car. What was the Q-tip for? He thinks he may have found Jolene's father. It was for a paternity test. Her eyes widened and she took a step back. Who is it? The spirit's reaction piqued my curiosity. He didn't give a name. It's probably someone the police came across when going through Mrs. Wagner's things. Do you know who her father is? She looked away. Nope. Probably some loser like her stepfather. Maybe. The hairs on the back of my neck stood at attention. I had a strong feeling she'd lied. Bryson and I can give her a good home and family. You've seen how well she fits in here. Christina nodded. But, she set her hands on her hips, but I have to go, right? No. I sensed Bryson inside the house and leaned forward to keep her attention. But we can't have any more outbursts. You jumped in and cut Bryson in front of the woman who will decide what happens to Jolene. Because he was here. Her voice rose, and that blasted perfume filled the air. Uninvited. You didn't give us the chance to tell him to go. The spirit's energy lessened. Her form faded, and the air felt lighter. Where's Bryson? Inside. I took a step toward her. Christina, what do you know about the things feeding off of Jolene? She glanced between me and the front door, as if preparing to bolt. You said they were other spirits, but I think there's something else. You bitch! She lunged for me, but this time her hand passed through my arm. She froze, spewed out more curses, and tried again. What's happening? We're trying to figure out what those things are so we can help Jolene. Bryson's magic seeped from the house, and I knew he'd not only closed the circle, but had laid a protection spell on the sleeping child. I protect her. Me. I've been with her since she was a baby. I'm her guardian angel, not you, not him. Christina disappeared through the wall. I covered my nose and mouth to keep from gagging on the perfume and joined Bryson in Jolene's room. Is she okay? He sat on the edge of the bed with one hand on the girl's chest. She's fine. Do you see them? I scanned the ceiling and shook my head. Can you lower the protection spell a smidge? Bryson raised his hand an inch from Jolene. The energy in the room shifted. Love's freaking baby soft hit me square in the face, but unlike before, I detected a hint of something sour mixed in with the sweet fragrance. Shadows danced across the ceiling. They're here, but clustered by the door. Outside the circle. I dropped my gaze. Yep. Let me in. You're killing her. Christina pounded her fists against the invisible barrier. Jolene's fine. Bryson's keeping her safe. I pointed to the ceiling. Do you know what they are? She either ignored me or couldn't hear the question over her screaming. The girl let loose a string of curse words and threats. I tuned her out and focused on the shadows. They were dark as pitch. Even the evilest humans had a glimmer of light. They aren't human, and never were. Bryson said, "Try to lure one into the bottle." Right. I grabbed the cobalt blue bottle from the nightstand. I have to leave the circle. Stay close. He glanced between Jolene and me. I braced myself for impact and stepped over the ring of blessed grave dirt and herbs. Of course, Christina took a swing, but as before, her hand passed through me. I set the bottle on the floor. Black Crow, come now for this restless soul. Take him to his ancestors far from here. Black Crow, show him peace. We beseech you. Come. How poetic. Christina pointed to the shadows. It didn't work. I repeated the spell 2 more times. As it is said, it will be. Did it work? Bryson glanced toward the door. No, but I have an idea. I carried the desk chair outside the circle, climbed up, and ran the mouth of the bottle through one of the shadows. Christina gasped. Covering the bottle with my hand, I turned my attention to the spirit child. What's wrong? She shook her head and squared her shoulders, but she couldn't hide the fear in her eyes. Everything okay? Bryson watched as I hopped down. Just peachy. I held the blue bottle to the light. Sure enough, something moved inside. I caught one. How's Jojo? No change in heart rate or respirations. He motioned to me. Any idea what it is? Not yet, but... I glanced at the wide-eyed spirit. I think Christina felt it when I touched it. You think? Or you know? I'm guessing. I asked her, but she's not cooperating. There's something else. Keeping my hand over the bottle, I moved to his side. Being cut off from Jolene has weakened her considerably. No, shut up. You don't understand. The spirit whined. I bet we could send her through the veil now. His back to the door, Bryson winked. He'd caught on to my slight change of plan. Use her weakness to get her talking and find a way to keep her the heck out of Jolene's body. Not yet. It would upset Jojo. But we can prevent her from possessing our girl again. Which is it, Christina? Do you want to cross over or stay here without stealing Jolene's body? I hate you. I hate you both. I turned to Bryson. She's already dead. We need to send her on her way. Movement near the door caught my attention. I turned, expecting to see the shadows. I blinked several times, not believing my eyes. Aaron stood in the bedroom door. His gaze fell on Jolene's motionless body and Bryson's hand above her heart. No, my God. Jolene, I'm sorry. Bryson turned, and the protection spell faltered. Thankfully, the shadows remained outside the barrier. Aaron shuffled toward the bed. Stop! I leapt in his path. It was too late. He'd scattered the grave dirt. He'd broken the circle. Christina rushed forward. Bryson slammed his hand down on Jolene's chest, and Aaron fell to his knees. Chapter 39. Bryson, is she okay? I searched the ceiling for the shadows, but they'd vanished. I don't see them or Christina. Somehow, I managed to keep my palm firmly over the top of the bottle in the commotion.
No change. Christina didn't make it to her.
He grabbed Aaron's shoulder.
She's alive, sleeping. But we have a problem.
The detective blinked as if wakened from a nightmare.
I thought,
She's fine, Aaron, but Bryson can't break contact with her, and I have my hands full. I tried to keep my voice steady, I really did, but I sounded like I was on the verge of hysteria, which I was. You broke the circle. I lost sight of Christina and those shadow things. Do you see them? He scanned the room.
no.
Bryson exhaled and slumped his shoulders.
Are you still wearing the amulet I gave you? Yeah.
Aaron reached into his shirt and pulled the cord containing the twisted metal charm free. Bryson extended his free hand.
Give it to me. We have to keep the spirit from entering Jolene's body.
Wait. I couldn't risk Aaron. Bryson hadn't seen or heard the spirit's anger, nor had he seen what she'd done to Aaron at the crime scene and the hospital. She'll possess him, and he's a heck of a lot stronger than a little girl. He stood and slipped the leather cord over his head.
It's okay. Here. Help her. Please.
The men locked eyes. They nodded in understanding to what I had no freaking clue. I don't like this. I don't like it one bit. She won't hurt Jolene, but she wouldn't hesitate to commit harakiri on you.
It'll be fine.
Aaron brushed my hair from my cheek. Bryson positioned the necklace above Jolene's face.
Lift her head.
The way Aaron held the girl reminded me of Scott holding his newborn son for the first time, like his hands were too big or too rough or too soiled to touch such a small, innocent child. Bryson adjusted the cord so the protection amulet rested over Jojo's heart. Aaron lowered her head to the pillow.
My God. She's beautiful. She looks so much like her mother. Are you sure she's okay?
I stood there holding the damned bottle and watching the scene unfold in front of me like an idiot. The way he touched her, the reverence in his voice, it made no sense. Until it did. She's your daughter. I blurted out the words before I thought it through. He couldn't be her father. That would mean he'd had sex with Jenny Wagner. How could he take the lead on her case? Surely he would have said something before now. Aaron nodded. He freaking stood there and nodded without a glance my way. But you're investigating Jenny Wagner's murder. I paused as the pieces fell into place. The promotion. You didn't excuse yourself from the case because of the damned promotion. Aaron tore his gaze from the girl.
No, I didn't recognize her until I saw the picture of her in the back of the SUV.
Bryson continued to monitor Jolene.
Can this wait until I'm sure the amulet is working?
I bit my lips to keep from saying something ugly. Aaron turned his back to me and watched as Bryson hovered his hand over Jolene from her brow to her feet. Christina materialized beside me. I told you he was keeping secrets. The detective's shoulders tensed. He'd likely overheard the spirit. I whispered, "Go away, or I'll banish you myself." I'm not leaving Jojo with him. He'll get her killed, just like he did me. Snap. Another piece fell into place. Bryson stood and rotated his shoulders.
Is Christina still weak?
The girl glared as I looked her over. Yes, still as see-through as frosted glass. I slid my hand through her middle. For now. She turned her venomous expression on Aaron. You touch him and I'll lock you in a bottle and hang you on the tree until I'm old and gray. I might decide to kill him myself, but I'd be damned if I let the petulant spirit harm a hair on his head. Will someone take this freaking bottle?
1 sec.
Bryson left the room and returned with a piece of plastic wrap and a hair tie.
What is that?
Aaron leaned closer.
One of the entities that was feeding off Jolene.
Bryson held the cling wrap over my hand and nodded. In one fluid motion, I pulled back and he covered the mouth of the bottle. I took the ponytail holder and wrapped it around the lip 3 times. When I looked up, Aaron had turned back to the sleeping girl. Bryson said,
Let's go into the living room. We have a lot to discuss.
It occurred to me that he'd taken the news rather well. Maybe too well. I gave him a questioning look, but he shook his head. Yep, he'd figured it out, or suspected it, long before I did. Aaron turned and left the room. I glanced back at Christina. The spirit stood near the bed with her back to me, much like Aaron had moments before. I'm not leaving her. She'd turned the statement into a dare. I motioned for Bryson to leave the room. I understand, but there's something you should know. The spirit turned. There's only one reason why you grew weaker when we set the protection spell on Jolene. Her shoulders sagged. I didn't know. I'm glad to hear that, but you've been siphoning off her energy for years. I suspect it's why she's so tiny for her age. It has to stop. I know. Step outside the circle. The spirit shook her head. No, please. I want to stay with her. You can, but you'll do it from here. I don't trust you. I'd never hurt her on purpose. Her voice rose, but the air remained perfume-free. Was she ashamed? This is your last chance, Christina. If you make me regret leaving you with her, I won't hesitate to drop-kick your butt through the veil. She whispered, You love her. I do. The ghost nodded and turned back to the girl in the bed. I left the bedroom door open and joined the men in the living room. Aaron and Bryson sat on either end of the couch, but I chose to sit in the chair across from them. Aaron leaned forward and placed his elbows on his thighs.
Like I said, I didn't recognize Jenny until I saw the photo.
I remained quiet because I didn't trust my voice, not because I had nothing to say. I had about 1,000,000 questions pinging around in my brain, but I'd let him speak first.
I met Jenny at a college party. I was a freshman. It's no excuse, but I was a wreck. My parents had died a couple of months before.
He dipped his chin and looked away.
It was a one-night stand turned into a 2-week fling. She told me her name was Celine, which was her middle name.
I remembered he'd told me how he'd struggled after his parents were killed in an automobile accident.
We exchanged numbers. I tried to reach her for a week or so, but gave up when she didn't return my calls.
He sat back and raked his hands through his hair.
About a year later, I ran into her in Orlando. She was pushing an infant in a stroller. I about pissed myself.
You didn't ask about the baby? I reminded myself this happened 8 years ago. Aaron was a kid, not the man sitting in front of me now.
She was with some guy. Introduced him as her fiancé.
Bryson furrowed his brow.
Ben Wagner. I don't remember him other than the way he marked his territory."
Aaron smirked.
"I figured if the kid was mine, she'd have told me and let it go."
I believed his story, except for one detail. How did you not recognize Jenny Wagner?
She'd changed. A lot.
He pulled the picture of the blonde holding a newborn baby from his pocket.
"I didn't know it was her until I saw this."
I studied the woman in the photo. The fresh-faced girl hardly resembled Jolene's mother's spirit. Bryson perched on the arm of my chair and stared at the picture.
"What do you plan to do now?" "I honestly don't know."
My heart broke for the little girl sleeping in the other room. She had a father, a good man who wasn't ready to be a father. Aaron shook his head.
"I'll sign whatever papers I need to sign to allow the two of you to adopt her."
Aaron, no! My hand flew to my mouth. How can you say that? She's an amazing little girl. Get to know her. Let her know you. Bryson rubbed my shoulder.
"Tessa's right. Take some time to think this through. I've thought about nothing else. I'm trying to do what's best for her. How can I be a father when I can't get near her?"
The pain in his voice stole my breath.
"The amulet will keep Christina from possessing her."
Bryson's voice cracked. I wasn't the only one struggling to keep it together. I'd heard enough. I wouldn't allow him to walk out on his own flesh and blood. We'll force her to cross over right now. Problem solved. Aaron met my gaze.
"I know absolutely nothing about raising a kid, let alone a little girl."
I moved to his side. You have us, and Grandma, and Dottie. You're not in this alone. He stared at the floor. I took his hand. You're Jolene's father. Please don't abandon her. Little girls grow up, but we never get over that hurt. You're my father? The girl's voice broke through the silence. Bryson and I shot to our feet, but Jolene and Aaron seemed frozen in time. They shared one of those moments that no matter the outcome, neither would forget. I wanted to go to her, to hold her in my arms and take away her pain, but not even a Cherokee fairy had that kind of magic. Bryson placed his hand on the small of my back. The physical contact helped to keep me on my feet.
"I am,"
Aaron whispered. Jolene turned her pale face toward me and Bryson. Do I have to live with him now? My knees threatened to give out, but my mate held me up the way he had since the day we'd met. No, baby girl. She turned to Aaron. You knew my mama?
"We met when we were very young. We didn't know each other long."
He glanced at me as if asking if he'd answered correctly. I nodded. Did you love her? The girl chewed her lip.
"I fell in love with her the second I saw her."
His smile took years off his face. For a split second, I saw the boy he might have been when he'd met Jenny Parks.
"You look a lot like her."
She told me I had your eyes. She placed a hand on each of his cheeks and turned his face toward the light. Yep, they're like mine. Bryson tightened his grip and sucked in a breath. She told me she named me after you and her. Aaron's eyes widened.
"My middle name is Joseph."
Joseph plus Elaine equals me. She pointed to herself. He cleared his throat.
Yep.
My poor battered heart couldn't take any more. Jolene stepped back and dipped her chin. I guess I'm glad to meet you, but I like it here.
I promise, I won't take you away from Tessa and Bryson.
She lowered her voice. Christina doesn't like you much. He exhaled, and his shoulders sagged as if the air in his lungs was the only thing holding him upright.
I let her down once, a long time ago.
I guess we can be friends. Aaron closed his eyes and nodded.
Thank you. I'd like that.
Jolene took Bryson's hand. Will you tuck me in? I can't find Christina. He scooped her into his arms.
Of course I'll tuck you in. And if you say please, I'll read you another chapter of Harry Potter.
Please? She sang the word into 3 syllables.
You got it.
Jolene rested her head on his shoulder. Bryson, I think Maddie made a mess. There's dirt all over my floor. When they walked into the hall, I sank onto the couch beside Aaron. Are you all right? He wiped his eyes on the back of his hand.
I'm sorry, Tessa. I should have told you sooner. I'm still in shock.
I'll get over it. Just, please, be good to that little girl. He pulled me into an embrace and buried his face in my hair.
I'll give it my best.
Chapter 40. Bryson, Aaron, and I stared at the cobalt blue bottle sitting in the center of the coffee table. The shadows swirling behind the glass reminded me of oil mixing with water, but there wasn't any liquid inside. As weird as the thing in the bottle was, it couldn't hold my attention. My thoughts remained fixed on one topic. Aaron is Jolene's father.
What do you plan to do?
Bryson, God love him, broke the awkward silence.
Right now, I plan to have a beer and figure out what's in that bottle.
Aaron grinned, but it lacked conviction. He rubbed his hands on his thighs. I'll get you one. A beer or 2 wouldn't hurt. Maybe they'd loosen the stranglehold my emotions had on my brain. Bryson?
No thanks. Magic and alcohol don't mix.
Sure. Right. Okay. I smiled like a lunatic and walked to the fridge. Bryson, you don't seem surprised by the news.
I've suspected for a while. They have a similar energy pattern.
I held my hands out. And you didn't mention it?
It wasn't my place.
He scrubbed his hand over his face.
I came to tell you 2 the test results. I didn't intend for her to find out yet.
Aaron stared at his hands. Bryson clenched his jaw.
But she did find out.
I set the beer next to the blue bottle and gave Bryson a hard look. Have you talked to an attorney?
No, but I guess I should.
Aaron kept his eyes low. Bryson stood and walked to the window.
You told her you wanted to be her friend.
His forehead wrinkled, but he continued to stare at his hands as if they held the answers.
I'd like to get to know her.
He set his hand on the wall and bowed his head.
You aren't the man I thought you were.
Bryson! I covered my gaping mouth. Give him 5 minutes to sort things out. He turned and stared at Aaron.
How long have you known? 8 days.
Bryson glanced at me, nodded, and turned back to Aaron.
You would have stood by and watched our mate suffer.
Aaron's shoulders tensed.
I helped heal her.
Brassen would not be deterred.
You announced you were finished with the relationship while she was injured. You refused to return our calls and sat on this news for over a week. I'm disappointed in you. I'm disappointed in myself.
Aaron stood.
Look, I'll be the first to admit I've been a jackass. I won't make excuses for my behavior.
He pointed at me.
And you don't get to either.
I held up my hands. No way would I get in the middle of this. These two had something to work out that, frankly, had nothing to do with me or Jolene's parentage. I was content to kiss, make up, and get on with our other 472 problems. Aaron lowered his voice.
When the topic of babies came up, I assumed you would be the father. I was jealous. It's not easy being the human in this relationship.
But he'd told me he wasn't ready to be a parent. He needed more time. I opened my mouth to speak, but thought the better of it.
The night Tessa was hurt brought back memories of the explosion when I thought we'd lost her. I felt so damned helpless.
Brassen nodded.
I understand. I felt the same helplessness. But you are my equal. The three of us are mated. That means something. I know.
The men stared at each other so long I thought I'd explode before one of them broke the silence. Brassen lowered his voice to little more than a whisper.
Do you want out of your commitment? No.
Aaron glanced between us.
No, not at all. Good.
Brassen's shoulders relaxed.
We have a bottle to uncork and a ghost to banish.
I blinked. Good? That was it? No hugs and tears, no promises and kisses? Aaron plopped onto the couch.
Before we do, I have some questions to ask her. Him. We need to deal with Ben Wagner.
Brassen chuckled. Now you two just wait a doggone minute. I shot to my feet, ready to fight. You can't just say all of those things and change the subject. Brassen cocked a brow.
You aren't happy with the outcome?
Yes, I'm happy, but that's beside the point. I motioned between them. I need to hear this won't happen again. I need reassurances. I need a hug, damn it. My men enveloped me in their arms.
I'm sorry, Tessa. Next time, we'll talk it through.
Aaron nuzzled against my cheek.
It won't happen again.
Brassen sounded far too amused for my tastes. It better not. I wiggled from between them. Aaron picked up the bottle.
This is the ghost feeding off my daughter? Do you know what it is?
He might not have planned to become a father, but the ease in which he referred to Jolene as his daughter told me he'd do just fine.
Not a clue.
Brassen seated himself on the couch. I have a hunch. It felt as if a hippopotamus had lifted from my shoulders. All was right in my world, or would be, once we had the spirits back on their side of the fence. Brassen and Aaron stared, waiting for me to speak. Now that I had their attention, I tossed my hair over my shoulder. Christina weakened when we cut her off from Jolene. That tells me she was feeding off the girl. She claimed she didn't know and said she wouldn't do it again. Aaron winced.
I don't understand how she got mixed up with Jolene in the first place.
Me either, but I intend to find out. Brassen leaned forward and took the bottle from Aaron.
She attacked Aaron at the crime scene and the hospital. How is she so strong when she's away from the girl?
My confidence faltered. I don't know for sure, but I think it's because she's so enmeshed with Jolene.
Perhaps.
Bryson shrugged.
And the thing in the bottle?
Christina felt it when I touched it. Aaron rubbed his jaw.
She's linked to it somehow?
Hear me out on this one. I sat between them and lowered my voice. The spirit child wouldn't leave Jolene, but that didn't mean she couldn't hear me from the bedroom. It's common for people to disassociate during times of physical and emotional trauma. She definitely suffered more than her fair share. Some researchers believe that extreme trauma can lead to breaks in personality. Bryson tensed beside me.
You said the shadows had never been human.
Yes, but is a second identity alive? Aaron said,
On the paranormal investigation shows, they talk about violent events leaving impressions on an area. Could they do the same on a person?
Bryson and I pulled back. I giggled before I could help it. You watch that stuff?
For research purposes.
He grabbed his beer.
I'll make some calls, see if any of the other medicine people have dealt with anything like this. In the meantime, I'm locking it up.
I nudged Aaron when Bryson left the room. You okay? Really? He slid his hand through my hair and cupped the back of my neck. I inched forward, and he closed the distance. The moment his lips touched mine, I lost control of the emotions that I'd fought so hard to ignore over the previous week. Aaron pulled back and wiped my tears with his thumb.
Hey, what's this?
Sorry, I'd just about given up hope for us. He pulled me close.
I'm sorry I hurt you.
Just don't do it again. I settled against him and let his familiar scent, cedar, sandalwood, and Aaron, recharge my soul. Bryson returned and kissed the top of my head.
Babe, if you're not up for more magic tonight, it can wait.
I pushed myself upright. Let's get it over with. Aaron motioned to the hall.
Are you sure it's okay to leave Jolene inside alone? What's to stop Christina from convincing her to remove the amulet?
Nothing, but she seemed horrified that she'd hurt her. I second-guessed my decision to leave the spirit alone with the girl. Bryson said,
It's almost 10. I'll call and ask Dottie to come a few minutes early.
Anxious to check on Jolene, I hopped up. Good idea. I'm going to speak to Christina. We could use her help. I'll meet you guys outside. The spirit stood in the same spot I'd left her, next to Jolene's bed. The ball of anxiety in my gut uncoiled. Christina, I was wondering if you'd be interested in settling an old score. She glanced over her shoulder. With Detective Burns. No, and I'd appreciate it if you'd allow Jolene to know her father. She smirked. I had to pick my battles. Right now, we had another fish to fry. We're going to banish Ben Wagner. Want to help? Her eyes went wide. To hell! I'd seen genuine fear in her expression. Perhaps she feared ending up in a lake of fire? She'd said something about not being good enough to get into heaven. I filed that little tidbit away for another time. To wherever he ends up. I've never seen hell. I'm not sure it's a thing. What would I have to do? Now that I had her attention, I softened my voice. You know him. I have some questions for him about the man in the blue car. You could tell me if he's lying. She looked at me as if I'd spoken in tongues. That idiot doesn't know anything about the man in the blue car. What about his brother? Do you know him? In typical teenage fashion, Christina rolled her eyes. Don't you think I would have recognized the man who did this to me? Uncle Rudy is a pervert, not a murderer.
Crap. What about the landlord at the trailer park? Did you ever see him?
She wrinkled her nose. All the time. He's a taxidermist. He used to scare Jolene with his stuffed roadkill animals. Double crap. I was fresh out of theories.
Gross? Okay, but you can still help us. Wouldn't you like a chance to see Ben Wagner suffer a little?
Hell yes.
Chapter 41. Bottles of various shapes and colors hung from the branches of the live oak. The spirit tree was beautiful, eerie, steeped in tradition, and a bunch of hooey. I'd spent the majority of my life speaking to the dead, and they weren't in those bottles. I explained my conversation with the spirit while Bryson and Aaron set candles in a circle around the live oak. Had it not been for what we planned to do, it would have been pretty, even romantic. They stood bare-chested beneath the heavy boughs. I had no idea why they'd taken off their shirts, but I wasn't about to complain. Bryson sprinkled salt around the ring of candles.
Since there's no need to ask Ben Wagner questions, we don't need to hold him. Summon, banish, and call it a night. I'd like to know who killed him,
Aaron said. Bryson and I glanced at Christina. Shooting daggers at Aaron, the spirit paced around the edge of the light. I didn't blame her for not entering the circle, not after we'd tricked her with the last one. Aaron sucked in a breath.
Forensics was wrong?
No, they were right. There's no way a tiny 9-year-old girl could have inflicted the injuries. I still had doubts that Jolene or Christina had killed Ben Wagner, but I had to face the truth, as much as it pained me to do so. Aaron turned to the spirit.
When this is over, will you tell me what happened to Jenny?
She flipped him the bird.
Right.
He sighed.
Ready? We need to focus.
Bryson motioned to me and Aaron. The three of us held hands inside the larger circle and spoke in unison. Benjamin Wagner, we summon your spirit into our presence. Hear our call. We beseech you. Come. I opened the imaginary doors inside my soul and allowed my magic to flow freely. It filled me and spilled from my palms into the men. We repeated the summoning spell a second time. Aaron's fingers tightened around my hand, and a familiar yet new energy flowed from him. It stole my breath as it whooshed through me into Bryson. The magic ricocheted back and settled inside me. My back bowed as I struggled to maintain the connection. Bryson and Aaron tightened their grips and repeated the spell for the third time. I jerked my hands free and fell to the ground. Very solid Harley boots filled my line of sight. I looked up and into the eyes of Benjamin freaking Wagner. Christina shouted from outside the circle. Hey, you pile of shit! How'd it feel to be slaughtered by a little girl? Ben turned toward her. Fuck you. Grabbing my arm and yanking me back from the spirit, Aaron whispered, Why's he solid? He's been resting up, stewing in that trailer. Christina put her hands on her hips. In your dreams? Ben rushed toward her, hit the barrier, and fell onto his backside. Where the hell am I? Tessa! Dottie chased Jolene down the porch steps, but she couldn't catch the little girl.
Jolene, stay back.
Bryson's voice boomed through the yard. Jojo, come here, baby. I'll take you to your mama.
Ben pushed himself to his knees. Aaron stepped in front of the spirit.
Like hell you will.
Bryson snatched the paper bag from the ground.
Tessa, give me a visual. Where is he?
Directly in front of Aaron. He shoved his hand into the bag and threw a handful of the grave dirt left over from our first circle. Most of it fell short. The bits that hit the ghost sparked and popped, but didn't stop Ben. He rammed his shoulder into Aaron's solar plexus. The air left the detective's lungs. "Say the spell!" I grabbed the bag from Bryson and rushed forward. Half in and half out of the circle, Aaron managed to get the spirit into a headlock. "Watch your feet!" I opened the bag and threw the contents on Ben Wagner's lower half. He howled like Satan himself was on his tail, but managed to tear out of Aaron's arms. Behind me, Bryson shouted for Jolene to stay back. The girl was screaming, but I couldn't make out her words. I turned toward her voice, and the spirit plowed into me, followed by Aaron's very solid and very heavy body. Pinned beneath the two of them, I struggled to get air into my lungs.
Shift, Tessa.
Bryson's magic crashed through the circle, along with a second energy I couldn't place. Responding to the call of her mate, my firebird surged to the surface. "No! Can't! Fire doesn't mix with death magic."
Do both.
Bryson chanted the banishing spell, but without Aaron and me to help, it would fail. Charlie's voice echoed through my head.
Trust your mates.
Before I could respond, Ben Wagner's fist connected with my face. The burst of pain broke my control, and the firebird broke free. Flames shot from me through him and into Aaron. The ghost screamed and rolled off me, though I doubted he'd felt the flames. Aaron took advantage of the distraction and pinned Ben to the ground.
Finish the spell.
I shook the dirt and charred grass from my feathers. Charlie. I had to find him. Bryson touched my wing.
Focus on the intention of the spell.
Bryson started. Aaron joined in, and I thought the words. "White Raven, draw near. Hear our cries. Come from your resting place on high. O White Raven, we beg of you. Come now and take this man through the veil. Seal the tear and forever keep him from returning. Your people beseech you. Come." After the second pass, I shifted back to my human form. "Your people beseech you. Come. As it is said, it is done."
It is done.
Aaron's body lurched forward.
He's gone.
Frantic to find my grandfather, I glanced around the circle. He'd come. I knew he had. I heard his voice. I laid back on the grass and tried to hold back my tears. "Bryson!" Jolene cried. I turned my head toward the sound of her voice. Graham May must have heard the commotion and come outside. She and Dottie held the hysterical child, while Christina and Achila, my mother, hovered over them. Bryson jogged to her while Aaron helped me to sit upright. "Why was he here? Why was he here?" Jolene sobbed. The man curled himself around her small frame.
He's gone now. He can't hurt you.
Aaron offered me his discarded shirt.
Are you hurt?
"Charlie was here." Aaron nodded.
I saw him too.
I didn't see him, but he spoke to me. Aaron brushed my hair from my eyes.
Are you hurt?
Physically, no, but I feel like someone zapped me with a power line. I tried to stand, but my legs wobbled. He lifted me in his arms and carried me toward the house, much like Bryson had done with Jolene. We passed Grandma and Dottie, who both stared at us with mouths open and eyes wide. I'm okay. I forced a smile. Grandma shook her head.
In all my years.
Dottie touched my foot.
Did you see him?
I shook my head and closed my eyes tight. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't. He'd come to me. He'd do it again. He had to. He just had to. Chapter 42. We'd survived the encounter with Ben Wagner, but we weren't out of the woods yet. Jolene had witnessed too much, including me turning into a big burning bird. Bryson sat in the chair with the girl curled in his lap, while Aaron held me on the couch. Grandma glanced between us with fire in her eyes. She clearly had something to say, and I doubted we'd like it. Dottie broke the silence. Tessa, if you're sure you're okay, May and I should get home. It's late. I eased away from Aaron. You aren't sleeping here tonight? She glanced between me and Jolene. Not tonight. It's best that you three stay with her, in case she has questions. Grandma took that as her segue into the conversation.
I darn sure have some questions. What was that out there?
I hesitated to discuss this issue in front of the child. Unfinished business. She gave me a look that would send a 5-star general packing.
I gathered as much. What sort of unfinished business?
Jojo sat upright. What did you do to him? Bryson kept his hand on her back.
We sent him away so he couldn't hurt anyone anymore.
But where? She turned to me as if expecting an answer. We sent him to heaven. I highly doubted the likes of Ben Wagner would ever walk through the pearly gates, but that wasn't for me to decide. The girl gave me a yeah right look and turned back to Bryson. Where did he really go?
That's between him and God. We just helped him cross over.
She seemed to think about it for a few seconds. Is that what you're going to do with Christina?
When you and her are ready. It's best for spirits to move on from our world.
I cringed. Bryson might have given the correct answer, but it wasn't something I wanted to hear, and I imagined Jolene felt the same way. All spirits? The hairs on my arms rose. At least one ghost in the house disagreed with his assessment. What Bryson means is some of them get stuck here. When that happens, it's best to help them cross over. Others, like your mama and Charlie, go back and forth. She giggled. Charlie says you're right. Grandma gasped.
Well, color me surprised.
Dottie pressed her hand to his chest.
He's here now?
Yes, ma'am. The girl stared off, as if listening. I can't say I'd grown used to the idea that my grandfather chose to speak to Jolene instead of me, but for once, I wasn't overcome with jealousy. Disappointment? You betcha. Miss Dottie, he says he's happy you found love again. He says he likes your new beau. My brain felt like a washing machine on the spin cycle. I'd gone from disappointed to shocked to a low-grade anger to resolved in 5 seconds flat. A new speed record even for me. Jolene nodded seemingly to no one, but I knew my grandfather whispered in her ear, "Grandma, he says to tell you he's still your boy." My 86-year-old grandmother swore she only shed tears at weddings and funerals, but she came darned close then. "And I'm still his mama." Aaron squeezed me a little tighter. I held my breath and waited for my message, or to hear the ones for the 2 men who'd stolen my heart. Jolene crawled out of Bryson's lap and walked to me. She motioned me close, as if to share a secret, and thumped my nose. The scent of my grandfather's cologne, old pipe smoke, and cedar wrapped around me like an embrace. Jolene whispered, "He says it's not time yet." I had so much to say to him, questions to ask, news to share, but as usual, he was right. This wasn't the time. Jolene wrapped her arms around her middle. "He's gone." Grandma wiped her eyes. "We'll be going, but the 3 of you better re-sod the charred grass in my yard and clean up those candles."
Yes, ma'am.
Bryson stood and showed the ladies out. Jolene wedged herself between me and Aaron. "Can I ask you guys something?" "Sure, baby. Anything." I kissed the top of her head. "Why's there a shadow form in that bottle?" I'd expected her to ask about the firebird or the ritual. It took a minute for me to shift gears. Bryson said,
Is that a term you made up?
"No, silly. It's an actual thing." She wiggled free and held the bottle up to the light. He wore an expression somewhere between amused and stumped. I sat up and hovered close in case she dropped it. "Do you know what they are?" "Sort of." She shrugged. "You know how people have 2 sides, like good and bad?" The 3 of us nodded. "They're the bad part." Jolene set the bottle on the coffee table and turned to me. "Can you show me how you turn into a firebird?" I had to hand it to the girl, whether she did it on purpose or not. She was a master at verbal sleight of hand. "You're not frightened of it?" "Nope. I knew already. I just hadn't seen it." Jolene turned to face Aaron. "Tessa's a firebird. Bryson's the Great Hawk. Do you know what you are?" He tensed.
I'm normal. I'm just a human.
Bryson leaned forward and placed his elbows on his knees. We'd wondered what, if any, magic Aaron had inherited when Bryson had shared a part of his soul with him. Oddly enough, Aaron had the ability to see spirits, something Bryson never had, but his daughter did. Jolene looked to her right, nodded, and said, "You'll figure it out when the time is right." The adults in the room exchanged glances, but the little girl grinned like she'd won the golden ticket to the chocolate factory. I stood and stretched. "All right, I think you've had enough excitement for tonight. Let's get you back in bed." Jolene said, "You didn't answer me. Will you show me the firebird?" "I will, but not tonight. You need your beauty sleep. You have last-minute pageant prep tomorrow." Bryson stood.
Come on, Munchkin. I'll tuck you into bed.
Jolene kissed my cheek, hugged Aaron, and gave Bryson her best pouty face. "I think I'll need 2 chapters of Harry Potter to go back to sleep."
I can do that.
He escorted her down the hall. I settled against Aaron. She's something else. He pulled me closer.
Yes, she is. Should I be worried that my kid is smarter than I am?
I think she's smarter than all of us.
What she said about shadow forms. It makes sense.
It does, but I'm not about to open that bottle until we know more. He tilted his face toward mine.
I missed you.
I missed you too. Now shut up and kiss me. And boy, did he. All night long. Chapter 43. Jolene sat strapped into the back seat of Brasson's Range Rover with curlers in her hair and red nail polish on her nails, fingers and toes. I, however, looked like a stampede of wild horses had trampled me, turned around, and mowed me down again. Don't be nervous. I chewed the cuticle around my thumbnail. I'm not. The girl flashed me her crown-winning smile. I grinned. I was talking to myself. I'm a wreck. She rested her head on my arm. It's your first pageant. It's okay to be nervous. Erin turned toward the back seat.
How many have you been in?
She lifted her little chin and flipped a curler back. Oh, I lost count. Something like 1,000 or so. He and Bryson laughed. Did you remember both garment bags and the caboodle with her makeup? I'd run through everything on the list that Patrick had emailed to us 3 times, but I couldn't help feeling like I'd forgotten something.
Yes, dear.
Bryson winked in the rearview mirror.
Relax. It's supposed to be fun.
Oh, yeah, a regular barrel of laughs. I folded my arms and watched the scenery go by. 40 minutes later, we entered the Orange County Convention Center. Did you know there are over 2 million square feet of exhibition space, 6,000 parking spaces, and 8 food courts shared between the 3 buildings? My man and Jolene each gave me a bewildered expression. What? I researched the place to make sure we'd know where to go. That old saying, the best laid plans of mice and men, never ceased to prove true. We'd wandered most of the 2 million square feet of the convention center. We're lost. I hoisted the duffel bag higher on my shoulder. The thing weighed 3 times as much as its owner. Aaron pulled out his cell phone.
The Chapin Theater, right?
Yes, that's where the pageant is. But we need the dressing room. I turned a full circle in hopes of finding a sign or board or flashing arrow. Nothing. Who are you calling?
Checking the app.
Aaron motioned to the left.
It's this way.
Patrick Price met us in the hall.
Oh, thank God. You're late. Come with me.
I heaved a sigh of relief and followed him. He stopped at the door.
Which one is coming inside?
One? I glanced between the men.
Only 2 people are allowed backstage. Me and one of you. Which is it?
I want Tessa. Jolene made the decision for us. I'd have expected her to choose Bryson. Since the ritual in the yard, she'd hardly let him out of her sight. Bryson knelt and gave her a hug.
Break a leg. Aaron and I'll be in the audience with the rest of the family.
She hugged his neck and turned to Aaron. He picked her up and blew a raspberry on her cheek.
You're going to rock this. Have fun.
She wiped her face. Okay, but you can't do that once I'm in makeup. He pretended to look abashed.
Understood.
Bryson gave me a quick squeeze.
Let's go.
Patrick took the garment bags from Bryson and led me and Jolene down a long hall and into complete chaos. Girls ranging in age from toddlers to teens filled the room, along with their designated 2 adults, mountains of makeup, costumes, shoes, and chatter. My goodness, the noise level was unbelievable. I thought this was for 8 to 11-year-olds, I shouted over the noise.
That's her division. This is the big leagues, baby. All of the age ranges compete in this pageant.
I wanted to ask how long this shindig would go on, but bit my tongue. I'd wondered why his list included 2 sack lunches and enough bottled water to hydrate a Little League baseball team.
This is our station. Jojo, take a seat.
Patrick removed the costumes from the garment bags.
Where's the Born to Run outfit?
The what? I played dumb. After listening to Jolene sing the lyrics about 1,000,000 times over the previous 2 weeks, I never wanted to hear another Springsteen song.
Leather pants and halter top?
He rummaged through the dresses. Oh, we changed that. I avoided his glare and set the makeup caboodle on the table.
You.
He pressed his hand to his heart.
You changed it?
It's Springsteen, not Metallica. We changed it to blue jeans, white tank, flannel shirt, and a red bandana.
Oh, dear God in heaven.
He waved his hand.
Forget it. Too late to worry with it now.
I like the new costume. Jolene wiggled in the chair. Bryson said the leather was inappropriate. Patrick tisked me over her head.
Honey, this is glamour and glitz. Last year, a 3-year-old dressed as the prostitute from Pretty Woman.
Prostitute? Jolene turned to me. Not something you need to worry about. I shot Mr. Patrick Price a warning look. He ignored me and went to work on Jolene's makeup and hair. An hour later, he'd finished. Jolene looked like she belonged on the set of Dynasty as a miniature Crystal Carrington. How do I look? She made a duck face. Beautiful. My brain stuttered at the thought of her as a teenager. It was a very good thing she had 2 men looking after her, one of whom carried a gun. Let's get you into your tap costume. Patrick tossed the sailor suit over the back of the chair. Here? I glanced around and noticed several of the girls changing in the open. He gave me a weird look and proceeded to help my little girl into her first costume. I swore to myself that I'd go with the flow. We were paying this man a small fortune to take care of Jolene's pageant needs. I had to trust him because I was out of my comfort zone. But I wouldn't leave her side.
She can't wear that.
He pointed to the black leather cord around her neck. I should have had Bryson put it on a different chain. She has to.
It's against regulation. No jewelry except for stud earrings.
Several of the other adults turned and stared. I leaned closer to whisper, It's important, medically.
It's too late to request approval for a Medic Alert bracelet, and that hideous thing is no Medic Alert bracelet.
Jolene tugged his sleeve. It's from my dad. My heart did a handspring into a double twist with a perfectly executed landing. She'd referred to Bryson as her dad. Patrick's expression softened. He'd likely assumed she meant Ben Wagner.
Tuck it into your costume and don't let it fall out.
She hid the amulet down the front of her top, while he hid the cord under the star-spangled flap in the back. He handed me a laminated badge on a lanyard.
Go take a seat with the other moms in the front of the left section. It's reserved seating. Show security your credentials and they'll let you in.
No, I'm staying with her. I folded my arms.
You won't be able to see her performance.
I'll watch the $300 DVD we were required to purchase. He shook his head, and ushered us to the line of girls waiting to go backstage.
They won't allow us to accompany her past the entrance. There are chaperones backstage, and she knows to follow the girls back here. Right, Jolene?
She gave him a fist bump. Right. You got this. I leaned against the wall as she disappeared in the line of girls speed walking down the hall.
She'll be fine. I'm going to watch from your seat.
He hurried in the other direction. I returned to our station, plopped into her chair, and texted Bryson. She's headed backstage. He replied, Everyone's here. How are you? Nervous. She's ready for this. I can't see her. Tell me how she does. I held the phone to my chest. It felt like hours before he replied.
She did awesome. Didn't miss a step.
The phone dinged with a video message. Bryson had broken the rules and recorded the pageant. I owed that man a huge kiss. I hit play and sat stunned as the screen filled with JoJo's performance. She smiled, she waved, she tapped her little heart out, and the crowd ate it up. I stood and searched for Jolene as the girls filtered back into the room. I did it! My girl ran and jumped into my arms. I showed her the phone. I saw. Her eyes went as wide as her smile. I've never had such a big audience. You didn't look nervous at all. She whispered into my ear. I cheated a little. My mama counted, and Christina called the steps. Oh. I had no clue how to respond. No parenting book covered how to handle this situation. Well, I guess it's not all bad hearing them, is it? Nope. She wiggled down.
You rocked it.
Patrick gave her a high five and pulled out her Bruce Springsteen costume. Between the jeans, red, white, and blue flannel shirt, and the bandana, she looked like a little blonde boss.
We have to hurry.
I'm gonna come in second, Mr. Patrick. They told me. She shoved her feet into her red Converse sneakers.
Did they say who was gonna win?
Patrick made the bandana into a headband. Ava, she whispered. My mouth fell open. You know about her ability? He winked.
It took me a while, but after my third relative passed on a message from the great beyond, I believed her.
I gave her hand a squeeze. Second place is great, but the winner gets $10,000, then goes to state. Jolene shook her head. Don't worry, Tessa. Christina will fix it. What do you mean? I looked around the room, searching for a little girl who looked like an Ava. She always makes sure I win. She dipped her chin. Before my stepdad, he'd be real nice after I won money. I knelt in front of her. Jolene, listen to me. We don't need the money. Bryson, Aaron, and I have more than enough to take care of you. Pandemonium broke out on the other side of the room. A girl cried and squirmed around like a kitten stuck in a pillowcase. Her mother tried to calm her down, but the little red-headed girl kept screaming and flailing. Is that Ava? Jolene nodded. I'm sorry.
No, none of that. Frowning will ruin your lipstick, and don't get me started on what tears do to mascara.
Patrick dabbed her face with a tissue. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. It's not your fault.
Too late to worry about it now.
He finished fussing with her costume.
We have to go.
I watched him lead her away and texted Bryson. We have a problem.
Is JoJo okay?
Yes, Christina is helping her cheat.
Cheat how?
She hurt the competition. I glanced at the hysterical red-headed girl.
Is Jojo wearing the amulet?
Yes,
We'll talk to her tonight.
I couldn't tear my gaze off of Ava. She'd quieted down, but now her mother and coach were shouting. A few minutes later, EMS came into the dressing room. Bryson texted.
Do girls' voices change?
I bit my lip to keep from giggling. No.
Jolene's did.
Like she's sick? I tapped the phone to my lips. She had coughed a couple of times the night before. Hopefully she wasn't coming down with a cold.
No. I'll explain later. How's the girl? Where's Jojo?
Patrick set his hand on my shoulder and I nearly jumped out of my skin. I'd been so focused on Ava and the texts, I failed to notice the other girls from Jolene's division had returned. I haven't seen her. He glanced toward the paramedics.
She had a rough performance. She's probably held up backstage. I'll check.
I texted Bryson. Is Jojo with you?
No.
It took me 3 attempts before my shaking fingers hit the correct letters. How long has she been off stage?
10 minutes, tops.
Patrick appeared in the entryway without Jolene. He hurried from one girl to the next. Each shook their heads. She's missing. I told myself she was taking her time because she was embarrassed by her performance, but it felt like a lie.
On my way. Don't move.
Chapter 44. Other than the mayhem with the paramedics on the far side of the room, pageant business went on as usual. Girls practiced, retouched makeup, changed costumes, pinned hair up, let hair down. Everything functioned like a well-oiled machine. Everything except my little girl was lost in the shuffle. The men arrived to the dressing room as EMS wheeled Ava out. Aaron wove through the crowd and grabbed my shoulders.
Where was the last place you saw her?
Going through that door. I pointed to the next round of girls lining up. Bryson gave me a quick hug. Aaron pressed into Patrick's personal space.
That leads backstage?
He took a step back.
Yes. Are you familiar with the layout?
Aaron had slipped into detective mode with one problem. He'd forgotten to slide into his just the facts man persona. Tension vibrated off him like music from a plucked guitar string.
Somewhat.
Patrick swallowed hard.
There's security back there. Take us to them.
He raked his hand through his hair and his gaze darted around the room.
I can't. The area is restricted. I've notified the backstage managers that she's missing. They'll find her. Take us now.
Aaron stepped close enough to kiss Patrick and flashed his badge. Smart move. Innocent people would take one look and cooperate. However, the guilty reacted in one of 2 ways. They got squirrely or ignored the badge altogether. Sweat broke out on the coach's upper lip.
Come with me.
Bryson followed, stopped, and pointed.
Stay here in case she comes back.
I stood helpless as they pushed their way through the line of girls and disappeared through the door. My phone rang. Hello? Tessa, this is Dottie. Have you found her? No, ma'am. Not yet. May and I are at the tables outside the auditorium. We'll keep an eye out for her here. I swallowed past the lump in my throat. Thank you. She said something else, but her words were lost on me. I disconnected the call and stared at the backstage door.
Jolene Parks.
I searched the room for the source of the male voice and found a group of 4 security guards.
The mother of Jolene Parks,
he said again. Me! I raised my hand and made my way toward them. I'm Jolene's mom. Please tell me you found her. The men exchanged glances. The one who'd called her name said,
Can you tell me what she was wearing?
Oh, God. I took a step back to keep my balance. I'd sat beside police officers while they conducted this type of interview with parents. I never imagined I would be on the other side of the conversation.
Mrs. Parks, we're doing everything.
It's Lamar. Miss Lamar. Her mother passed away. I'm her foster. I stopped explaining myself and got down to business. Jeans, white tank top, and a red, white, and blue flannel shirt. She's 9, but small for her age. She looks 6, about 42 inches tall, 48 pounds. Blonde hair, blue eyes. He jotted down some notes.
May we have a contact number?
I relayed my information, as well as Bryson's. Her father and his friend are backstage now. He's a police detective. Her dad is. I work for OCPD, too. They exchanged more glances.
We'll be in touch. Please stay on the premises.
Where else would I go? They turned and left without answering. I reached behind me for a table or a chair or anything that might keep me upright. It's real. She's not hiding. She's not chatting with another contestant. She's missing. A dark-haired woman hurried to my side. Is everything okay? My daughter's missing. I heard myself answer, but my mind had gone blank. Jolene, right? The woman guided me to a chair. I nodded, then bent at the waist to catch my breath. My lungs tightened as if in a vice grip. When I sat up, my pulse thundered and spots danced before my eyes. The woman put her fingers to her lips and whistled. Listen up! The room quieted. Has anyone seen Jolene Parks? Little Miss Division? She did the tab number in the sailor suit. Blonde? Tiny? Someone shouted, I saw her come off stage after the second round of talent. People started to whisper, but the noise level quickly rose. The woman whistled again. Anyone else? Another woman shouted, My daughter said she saw her leave backstage with a man. I stood. Where's your daughter? The woman looked down at a little girl in a pink tutu. She's here. I hurried through the stunned crowd and crouched in front of the girl. Do you remember what he looked like? She shook her head and clung to her mother's legs. The gesture reminded me of another little girl, a little girl who was in serious danger. Please, did she seem scared? She was crying. The child looked at her mother. The woman knelt beside her. It's okay, baby. Do you remember anything else? She shook her head. Thank you. I stood and relayed the information to Bryson via text. He replied, We found her necklace. My world stopped spinning.
On my way to you.
A man and a girl approached me. He said,
This is Kylie. She saw Jolene leave with a man in a black jacket.
I wanted to curl into a ball and fall apart, but I had to push on for Jojo. Was he carrying her? She shook her head. No, but she was crying. I sucked in a breath. I thought it was her dad or something. Thank you for telling me. Bryson came through the door and headed straight for me. His magic seemed to suck all the oxygen from the room. He didn't seem to notice the humans scampering out of his path. The predator had more important things to deal with than prey. Another girl saw a man take her out the backstage exit. She went with him willingly. Maybe she knew him? Bryson crushed me against his chest. He might have looked in control, but his heart thudded against my ear.
Aaron called it in. We need to go.
My brain stuttered. Security told me to stay. He pulled back and met my gaze.
Dottie's going to stay here. We need to contact Christina.
Chapter 45. I took 2 steps for each of Bryson's as I trailed him through the parking lot. We should fly.
Can't risk it. We'll need clothes if they find her.
He yanked the driver's side door open. When they find her. I tried to sound brave, but memories of another little girl's body lying in a field tightened my chest. Please, God, let her be okay. Bryson started the engine and backed out of the spot before I'd managed to shut my door.
Call Haley. See if there's any mention of a male in JoJo's records.
I'd read her file. Other than the wrongly accused father, there were no other family members mentioned. There wasn't.
Call her anyway. We have to start with the obvious.
He hit the gas. I reached for my purse at the same time he braked and bumped my head on the dash. Slowed down a little. We won't do her any good if we're injured or arrested.
Sorry.
His shoulders tensed and he tightened his grip on the steering wheel, but he slowed to an almost legal speed. I dialed Haley's number. Tessa, hi. I'm glad you called. About the other day, sorry to cut you off, but was there any mention of a male relative or friend of the family in Jolene's records? Haley paused. Not that I recall, but most of the information came from the next-door neighbor. Okay, thanks. Any chance you can go into the office and double-check? Jolene's been... I couldn't bring myself to say the word. Tessa, you're scaring me. What's going on? She's been kidnapped. 2 girls saw her go off with a man. She was crying, but she went with him. My voice thinned until it gave out. I'll go right now. Call the police. Thank you. Aaron was with us. My traitorous brain conjured up images of decayed clothing and bones. What if we never found her? What if she was dead and buried in an unmarked grave? Could I hold out hope like the Kellers? Or would I die of a broken heart like Mrs. Hayes? Bryson motioned for me to hang up. I have to go. Call me if you find anything. I disconnected. He glanced at me.
Did Aaron follow up on Wagner's brother?
I searched my memory trying to recall if I'd said anything to Aaron about it. I couldn't remember much of anything before Patrick returned to the dressing room. I don't know. He banged his hand on the steering wheel.
She shouldn't have been alone.
I winced. Patrick said,
I don't give a damn what he said. Someone should have been with her.
I hugged myself and looked out the window. The logical part of me knew he was angry at the situation, but it sure felt like he'd placed the blame at my feet. Bryson touched my thigh.
I didn't mean to take it out on you. I'm sorry.
I know. I thought about what Haley said and dialed Samuel's. No answer.
Who are you calling?
He glanced my way. Samuel's, but he's probably with Aaron by now. I scrolled through my contact list and hovered over the chief's name. Roxy, the next-door neighbor, knew Jenny for years. She might be able to help, but I don't have her number. I'm calling the station. Bryson nodded.
Lamar, why are you calling on your day off?
His calm, cool cop voice provided something familiar to hold on to. I need a favor. It's related to the missing pageant girl. Second-guessing my decision to call him, I went into verbal diarrhea mode. Witnesses reported the girl walking out the exit with an unidentified male, but she was crying. I need a private telephone number for a neighbor, sir. For the only person I can think of who might be able to make an ID on this guy.
You know we don't give out that kind of information.
My hand tightened on the phone. I had to get that number. It was our best shot. Are you aware that the missing girl is Jolene Parks? The same Jolene Parks who erroneously confessed to killing her stepfather.
Shit.
He exhaled into the receiver.
I'll put out an APB, but that's all I can do.
I'm begging you. That little girl is important to me. My family is fostering her. He grunted.
We'll talk about that Monday. Give me the name. I'll have a detective follow up on it.
Something inside me snapped. I didn't care that he was my boss and could fire me at any second. We had to find Jolene, no matter the consequences. Jolene's 9. Blonde hair, blue eyes, the exact profile of the girls we've found dead. Do you want another murdered kid on your hands? Bryson squeezed my thigh. The chief's tone deepened.
I need a name to get the goddamned number.
I have a first name. Roxanne. She lives in the trailer next door to the Wagners, eastern side, sir. The clicks of a keyboard came over the line.
I'll forward the information to Burns.
These people don't trust the police. I've established rapport with her. Send me the number.
Monday, 9 a.m., my office.
He disconnected. I sank back against the seat. I'm so fired.
Did you get the number?
Bryson turned off the highway. No. He said he'd send it to Aaron.
That's a start.
The lines around his eyes deepened.
Jojo isn't wearing the amulet, which means Christina's able to possess her. She's stronger with the spirit, able to fight back.
I didn't want to think about my little girl in the sort of situation she'd need to defend herself. I didn't want to think at all. But my brain swirled with questions and scenarios that chilled me to the core. She didn't find. She went with the guy. Bryson, she's still squeamish around men. Why would she do that? He stared straight ahead, either considering or ignoring my question. My phone chirped. The chief had sent a text message with 10 digits. He sent the number. I took a deep breath and dialed. Hello? The woman sounded as if she'd chain-smoked 3 packs in the previous 5 minutes. Hi, is this Roxanne? The words came out in a croak. Who's asking? 'Cause if you're selling, I ain't buying. Roxy, this is Tessa. Please, don't hang up. I need your help. It's Jolene. My breaths came too quick, and I was sure she hadn't understood a word I'd said. What's wrong? She was taken from backstage at the pageant. Witnesses think she might have known the guy. Are there any male relatives or friends of the family that you can think of? She half gasped, half groaned. Ben's brother Frank is the only relative, but Ben had his pool hall buddies around the house most weekends. Do you know any of their names? The line went quiet so long I thought I'd dropped the call. Roxy? How long ago did this happen? Did anyone see what he looked like? She sounded scared. Normal under the circumstances, but something felt off. She'd whispered, as if she didn't want someone to overhear. I took Bryson's hand. 2 hours, maybe. One of the girls said he had on a black jacket. I listened to her breathing for a few heartbeats. Roxy, if you know something, please. No, I don't know anything. I'm in shock. I'll try to get a list of names for you. Thanks. Hoping she'd say more, I waited for her to hang up. Bryson parked the SUV next to the house and shifted to face me.
What's wrong?
She got squirrely on me. I think she has an idea who took Jolene. We should go over there and talk to her in person. He hesitated, likely debating our next move.
Let's summon Christina first. She's a better bet.
Okay. I climbed out of the vehicle and stopped dead in my tracks. We wouldn't have to summon Christina Hayes after all. The spirit waited for us on the front porch. Chapter 46. I set my hand on Bryson's arm. Christina's on the porch. She doesn't look good. Stay here. Let me talk to her. He opened his mouth as if to argue, but nodded and leaned against the SUV. The spirit child wavered in and out of view as I approached. Her eyes were swollen and puffy, like she'd been crying for days instead of hours. He has her. Her words knocked the wind out of me. I grabbed the railing for support. The man in the blue car? Looking everywhere except at me. She nodded. Do you know where she is? I forced my feet to move up the steps. In the woods. Christina curled in on herself, her form flickering. Stay with me. She needs you. She shook her head. This is my fault. It's all my fault. It's his fault and we are going to make him pay. Which woods? Can you take me there? I was so scared. I saw him. It was like he could see me. I begged Jolene to take off the necklace so I could help her. The shadows that had fed from Jolene had somehow multiplied and hung close to Christina. Jojo had said they were the bad parts of a person. Were they increasing because Christina had done something wrong? Or because she thought she'd failed the girl? That was smart. She's not wearing it now. Could you go to her? Maybe we can track you. I had no idea how we'd go about following a spirit, but the idea of Jolene facing that monster alone terrified me. I can't. She stared into my eyes, and for the first time, I saw her terror. I'd asked her to face the man who murdered her. I understand. I tapped my fingers to my lips. Did you see the car? Same blue car. A spark of hope blossomed inside me. I turned to Bryson. Get Aaron on the phone and relay information. I need you to stay with me. I wished I could touch her or give her a hug. I feel so weak. I might be able to help you. I let down the barriers holding my magic inside and let it flow into my palms. Touch my hand. The hint of defiance in her expression told me the girl still had some fight left in her. She poked at the ball of energy with her index finger, and her eyes widened.
I've got him.
Bryson jogged to the porch. Christina took my hand and siphoned off the magic. While she didn't solidify, she did stop flickering like an old television screen. The serial killer has Jojo in the woods somewhere. I locked eyes with the spirit to confirm I'd gotten it right. Bryson sucked in a breath, but I couldn't face him. Not yet. Not when the anguish in his deep brown eyes would shatter my thin veneer of control. She nodded. He's still driving the same blue car, so it's an older model. How many doors does it have? 4. It's a Toyota. Oh, thank you, Jesus. I repeated her words. Did you see anything else? License plate, what he was wearing? Which roads he took? She bowed her head. Christina, any little detail might help. Not above bribing her for information, I pulled more magic to my palm. She absorbed the energy into her hand. Black jacket, jeans, and a cap like the security guards were wearing. He drove her past where they have the fair, the big fair in the spring. He took her past the Central Florida Fairgrounds, heading west. I repeated the description, and Bryson related to Aaron. Christina, can you go to where Jolene is and look for street signs or anything that'll help the police locate her? I'll try. Thank you. We'll wait. Please hurry. The spirit vanished. She's gone. I sat on the top porch step and put my head in my hands. My little girl's safety depended on a traumatized teen-aged spirit instead of the 2 magical creatures and police detective who should have protected her. Bryson dropped down next to me.
Aaron's putting out word about the car.
We have all this magic, and there's nothing we can do to save her. Rage bubbled up inside me, but they burst as quickly as they'd come. Anger I could handle. This emptiness was another story. He cupped my cheek and turned my face toward his.
You sent a spirit to her. That's something, and a hell of a lot more than I can do.
You didn't see Christina. She was fading. I'm not sure. He pressed his fingers to my lips.
We will find her and bring her home.
I wanted to believe him, but a little voice in the back of my head reminded me of the reason I hadn't wanted children. I'd make a lousy mother, and my babies would suffer. Bryson stood.
I'm going to go through the spell books and make some calls. There has to be more we can do.
I'll wait out here for Christina. He gave me a half-hearted hug and went inside. I should have gone inside with him, just like I should have followed Jolene backstage. I couldn't find the energy to move or speak or shed a tear. What kind of mother doesn't cry when her baby's missing? The sun sank closer to the horizon. Bryson had come out to check on me a couple of times. He'd asked me to come inside and eat something, but I'd waved him off. I couldn't risk Christina returning to an empty porch, nor did I want to see Jolene's things. I'd packed my grandfather's things after he passed away. I couldn't go through that particular hell again. It would break me. Sometime after dark, Grandma and Dottie returned home. My great-grandmother gave me a hug and went straight into the kitchen, but my aunt lingered. Come sit with me on the swing. My knees are too old to get down that low. Dottie patted the spot beside her. I'm scared. She closed her eyes. Me too. Did you see Aaron at the convention center? She tilted her head and regarded me for a moment. This isn't your fault, you know. I blinked. She'd ignored my nice, safe question and went straight for the gut. Dottie took my hand and gave me the same look she'd given me since I was younger than Jolene. I know you, Tessa Marie. I know every smile and every frown. I know when your heart is broken and when it's full. even if you try to hide it. I should have been with her. I choked on the words. I let her go off alone. From what I understand, she wasn't alone. She was with a bunch of other girls, and there were other adults who were supposed to be watching them. I pulled my hand back and shook my head. But she's my responsibility. Tessa, no parent can be with their child 24 hours a day. She leaned forward and put her face in front of mine. I watched you with her. You may not have carried her in your belly, but you were as good a mother to her as I've ever seen. I opened my mouth to argue, but she shook her head. You and Bryson gave that girl a family when she had no one. It's easy to love an infant, especially your own. It's something special to love one that's half grown and comes to you broken. I let her words begin to stitch together the frayed edges of my heart, even though I feared the threads would split wide open again. Thanks, Aunt Dottie. She pulled me into an embrace. You're welcome, sweet girl. Bryson burst out the front door.
Aaron called. They have a lead.
Chapter 47. Dottie and I scrambled to our feet so quickly the porch swing clattered into the railing.
Security cameras caught an older model, blue Toyota, leaving the convention center parking lot. Out-of-state tag. They're working to get information on the owner.
He continued speaking, but I'd stopped listening. My hope died like a rose on the vine when he mentioned the tag. Aaron said the guy used stolen tags when he kidnapped Christina. He grasped my shoulders.
They put out an Amber Alert on the vehicle and tag. There have been 3 reported sightings near Monteverde.
That's not far from here. Dottie took my hand. Bryson pulled his shirt over his head.
I'm going to shift and head that way.
Adrenaline shot through my veins. She's close. We'll find her. I'm coming with you.
I need you to stay here, in case Christina comes back or Aaron calls with a location.
I hated the idea of staying behind and doing nothing. I should at least follow in the SUV with your phone and clothes.
Aaron had an idea.
He handed me his running armband with his cell phone inside.
I need you to strap this to my neck after I shift.
He dropped his jeans. Oh. My aunt turned around to give him privacy. You can't fly with this thing on. It'll strangle you. I tested the weight of it in my hand. It's too heavy.
Strap it to my leg.
He stepped out of his boxers and shifted, likely to stop me from arguing. I knelt in front of the great hawk and experimented with the armband. After 2 unsuccessful attempts, I wrapped the straps around his lower leg 3 times before securing the Velcro. I don't think it'll stay. He marched around in a circle, and the phone slid down. Dottie said, "Hook the band in your talons." Bryson dipped his head and took to the sky with the cell dangling precariously from his foot. When things settle, I'm going to design a little backpack for you two, big enough for some lightweight clothes and a phone. Dottie walked toward the front door. Come in. We might as well get some food in our bellies. It's a nice thought. I stopped in the living room and stared at the desk Bryson had set up for Jolene to do her schoolwork. Purple baskets, pink sticky notes, every color marker imaginable. Which part? Food or bird backpacks? Dottie clanked around in the kitchen. Bags. We can't carry them on our backs. It'll throw our center of gravity off. They'd need to hang beneath us. The conversation was absurd, but it occupied my brain enough that I didn't have to struggle to breathe.
How about a turkey sandwich?
I'm not hungry. I'd seen mothers on television dramas proclaiming they wouldn't eat until their child could eat, sleep until their child could sleep, or laugh until their child could laugh. Until that moment, I'd chalked the sentiment up to overwritten melodrama. I was wrong. My cell phone rang. I fumbled to get it out of my pocket and dropped it. Thankfully, it continued to ring. Hello? This is Tessa. The woman on the other end of the line sounded like she'd called from the bottom of a lake. It's Roxanne. I need to talk to you in person, ASAP. I forced air into my lungs. I can't come now. Please, if you know something, tell me over the phone. I might know who took Jolene, but I'm not sure. Please, just get here as soon as you can. She sounded like she was on the verge of a meltdown. I'll be there as soon as possible. Okay, please hurry. I don't know when he'll be back. Who? When who will be back? She hung up. I dialed Aaron and relayed the conversation as close to verbatim as possible.
I'm nearby. Wait for me.
He lowered his voice.
I mean it. Don't leave until I get there.
I won't. Turning to Dottie, I said, Aaron's picking me up. The old next-door neighbor says she might know something. The color drained from her face.
Take a change of clothes for you and Bryson.
Good idea. I hurried into the master bedroom and threw jeans and t-shirts into a bag. I thought about leaving a note for Christina, but what could I say? Stay here and wait for me? I'd rather her return to Jolene than sit on the porch. I have my phone. Call me if you hear anything.
You do the same.
She gave me a quick hug. Please be careful. I will. I'd paced around the front yard for 15 minutes before Aaron arrived. As soon as his car came to a stop, I yanked the door open and hopped inside. We have to hurry. He sped down the bumpy drive and onto the dirt road leading to the highway.
Here's the plan. You're going to wait in the car while I question her.
That's a bad idea. She doesn't even know you're coming. What if she clams up? We'll get nowhere. He ran through the gears in rapid succession.
Okay, but you aren't going in alone.
I'd expected him to argue. When he agreed, I found myself at a loss.
I mean it, Tessa. We don't know what we're walking into. I go with you, or I'm taking you home and going alone.
We go in together. I drummed a rhythm on my thighs. Aaron broke darned near every traffic law in the books, but we arrived at Roxy's trailer in record time. He parked on the street one lot down.
You do the talking. Don't let anyone get between you and the door. Anything happens, you run.
Got it. Aaron's long legs ate up the concrete and left me struggling to keep up. He scaled the steps, knocked on the door, and came back down. Roxy looked out the window. 2 seconds later, the locks clicked and she peered out through a slit. I thought I told you to come alone. No, you didn't. I motioned to Aaron. He's my fiancé. I don't care. He's a cop. Aaron placed his hand on the door.
I'm not here on police business. I'm Jolene's biological father.
I thought she might slam the door in our faces, but she cocked her head and stared.
Bullshit.
Aaron opened his jacket.
No badge. Please, if you know something that can help me find my daughter.
Roxy glanced up the street and ushered us inside. Can I get you something to drink? I had a bad feeling about this. No, we're in a hurry. She motioned to the couch on the other side of the room. Have a seat. I took a step, but remembered what he'd said about staying near an exit. Actually, can I use your bathroom? Roxy poured herself a half glass of whiskey. It's the last door on the right. I gave Aaron a quick wink and walked down the hall in search of a second exterior door. In Florida, mobile homes built after a certain year were required to have two forms of egress. I'd learned that little tidbit from one of Darlene's boyfriends, who happened to sell trailers for a living. The second exit was across the narrow hall from my destination. I stepped into the bathroom, checked to make sure the coast was clear, and unlocked the back door. It'd save us a couple of seconds if we needed to make a quick escape. Aaron's voice carried down the hall. He had Roxy talking. Maybe she'd open up to him. Lord knows she'd gushed about him when I'd first met her. I went ahead and did my business while I was there and took a few extra minutes washing my hands and face. I stepped into the hall at the same time the back door opened.
Rox, you left the damn door unlocked again.
The man looked as surprised to see me as I was him.
What the hell are you doing here?
I recognized him from Jolene's drawings, and I'd bet Graham May's life he'd parked a blue Toyota outside the trailer. Stammering, I backed into the restroom. Nothing. Walt, she's a friend of mine. She stopped by for a visit. Roxy appeared at the other end of the hall. He grabbed for me, but I slammed his arm in the door. At least I tried to. The door smashed inward and sent me backward against the vanity.
Put your hands up and step out slow,
Aaron called from the hall. I couldn't see past the man in front of me, but I knew my detective. He'd come armed. Walt, the man in the blue car, the man who'd stolen Jolene from us, moved quicker than I would have thought possible in such a tight space. Before I could squeak, he had my back to his front and his arm around my neck.
Put the gun down, pig.
Walt pressed something hard against my neck. I tried to communicate with my eyes. I needed Aaron to keep his firearm in his hand. I needed him to trust me. I needed him to take the damned shot. His gaze moved from me to the man and back again. Please, baby, just let them go. Roxy did the worst possible thing in this situation. She boxed Aaron in.
You called the police?
His breath smelled like cigarettes, whiskey, and desperation. She called me. I called the police. I stared at Aaron and mouthed, shoot him. Even if he missed and hit me, I'd rise from the dead. He shook his head a fraction of an inch.
Roxanne, go back into the living room.
I thought about headbutting Walt and taking the bullet to give Aaron the shot, but I hesitated to cause my own death. With my luck, I'd end up breaking some cosmic rule and forfeiting the ability to rise. I mouthed, do it.
Where did you take Jolene?
Aaron tightened his grip on the Glock's hand strap and widened his stance.
Screw you.
He pressed the barrel to my temple. Walt, please let her go. She's looking for a missing girl. She got it wrong, right? We don't know anything about no girl, do we, baby? I met Aaron's gaze and rolled my eyes to the side.
Shut up, Roxy. This is your doing.
He jostled me and pushed forward.
Roxanne, go out the front door.
Matching him step for step, Aaron backed down the hall.
You leave, she dies.
Walt's fingers bit into my arm. Turn her loose. The woman's voice grew more hysterical by the minute.
Shut the hell up, Roxanne.
His breaths came faster. I forced my body to go limp in hopes of throwing him off balance, or at the very least giving Aaron a clean shot. Holding me upright with my neck in the crook of his elbow, he slammed the gun against my temple.
Keep walking.
Aaron cleared the hall.
What'd you do to the girl, Walt? Tell me where she is, and this'll end.
Tell them where you took Jolene. Roxy stood near the front door. Twin streaks of mascara ran down her face. Just tell them.
I said, shut the fuck up.
The arm around my neck tightened. I held my breath, waiting for the chance to make my move. Roxy's voice rose. I know you took her. Tell them where she is. The gun fired inches from my ear. Chapter 48. The gunshot tore through my head. My right ear felt as if he'd shoved the barrel through the canal and into my brain. The acrid scent of gunpowder coated my nostrils and tongue. In those first few milliseconds, I thought the bullet had hit me. A second shot rang out. The man behind me jolted, and another gun went off. This time, a bullet, not sound, ripped through my skull. My body went limp, and I had the sensation of falling into a cold pool. A gun fired in the distance, far from where I sank beneath the frigid, dark water. Someone called my name. Aaron. I recognized his energy. I wanted to kick my legs and swim for the surface, but I'd fallen too far. I had no idea how long I'd drifted when another voice called my name. This one moved alongside and through me. I tried to turn my head, but at some point my brain had become unplugged from my body. The firebird must rise, my daughter. Achila, my mother, came to me when I needed her most, but I couldn't remember why I needed her now. The water was cold, but not overly so. I felt at peace here beneath its depths. The fire inside me had stilled. It reminded me of what the preacher said a baptism should feel like. My troubles and sins had washed away. I was still and in the presence of the Almighty.
Tessa Marie, it's time. You must rise.
My grandfather's voice lacked the ethereal quality of my mother's. His had an edge of anger and urgency. Charlie? I thought I'd spoken aloud, but how could I speak underwater?
Wake up, child. Jolene is counting on you.
Jolene. Her sweet face appeared before me. She had Aaron's eyes, except hers lacked the weariness that came with age and experience. Is she alive?
Yes, but you must rise.
The ember of magic in my gut flickered. I imagined the walls inside me falling away and a breeze igniting the fire. The first flames appeared fragile and weak, but soon grew taller and hotter until they erupted from my skin. I came back into myself, and the earth careened to the right, sending me sliding. I had no time to catch my balance before it slammed to a halt. I flew forward and smashed against something solid.
Shit, Tessa!
A man shouted. The firebird recognized Aaron as her mate, but my human half struggled against the hands pulling me. I landed hard enough to bring me back to the present. However, I had no idea where or when that was. I glanced around to orient myself. Aaron looking freaked out. Side of the road, charred back seat. The smells and sounds came back first. I remembered gunpowder, bang, blood, screaming. Next, I remembered the pain. My hand flew to the side of my head. The bastard shot me. He's the one who has Jolene. Aaron wrapped his arm around my shoulders and helped me to stand.
Yes, he did. But right now, I need you to get in the car. We can't have you naked on the side of the road.
Oh, yep. I'm naked on the side of the road. Is it drivable? I nodded toward the car. Aaron slid into the driver's seat and started the engine.
Looks that way. Get in. We have to find Jolene.
I reached behind me and grabbed my still smoldering bag of clothes. Great. He rolled the windows down before pulling onto the road.
Salvageable?
I pried the melted plastic zipper apart. Mostly. Aaron leaned forward and scanned the sky.
Bryson's up there somewhere.
With the firebird swirling inside me, I could sense him in the distance. He's close. Straight ahead. Tell me what happened. Aaron kept his eyes on the road and hands tight on the wheel.
He shot Roxanne. I fired at him but got him in the shoulder. He shot you, and I panicked.
I pulled a shirt over my head. Weren't there 4 shots?
I fired again, but he got away.
And Roxy? I wiggled into a pair of jeans. Aaron shook his head.
Bryson showed up when I was calling it in.
That makes sense. He would have felt me die. I turned toward the window. I'd bit the big one before, but this time was different. I'd lingered on the other side rather than remaining in the physical world, aware and trapped inside my body.
I felt you die.
He narrowed his eyes. Yes, because we're mated now. We weren't the first couple of times it happened. Something hung on the edge of my brain, like an old song lyric waiting for a melody. We're following Bryson. I assume he's following Walt?
Yep, and I'm gonna kill that son of a bitch.
Do you think he's returning to where he left Jolene? Aaron took my hand.
Baby, listen. There's no way to know where he's heading. He could be trying to leave the state. I'm praying he's leading us to her, but we need to prepare ourselves.
No! I remembered the most important part. She's still alive. Charlie told me. He came to me when I was floating.
Alive? Floating? What are you talking about?
He turned and stared. When I died, I was in a sort of limbo. Charlie spoke to me. I gasped and pointed while the words traveled from my brain to my mouth. Watch out! Aaron cut the wheel, but it was too late. We plowed through the girl. Tires squealed and the car slid sideways. I grappled for something to hold on to. Dirt and debris blew in through the windows and stung my eyes. The car bounced, sending us airborne. We landed with the unmistakable sound of metal twisting, but we didn't stop. Branches scratched the sides of the car. Headed straight for a tree, I braced my hand against the dashboard. My arm snapped on impact. I heard it as much as I felt the bone shatter. Coughing the dust from my lungs, I turned to Aaron. Blood running from a wound on his forehead, he slouched forward over the steering wheel. I reached for him with my good hand and my magic. Aaron? He groaned and lifted his head.
Did I hit her?
I think so.
Was it Jolene?
Aaron's expression reminded me of Amy Keller's father, all business on the outside, but a cyclone brewed beneath the surface. Unable to consider any other answer, I said, "No, it wasn't her."
We have to find her. You saw what he did to those girls.
He dipped his head and stilled. For a split second, I thought he'd passed out again. "We will. I swear it." Cradling my arm to my chest, I opened my door and staggered out. Christina Hayes materialized a foot away. "You have to hurry. Follow me." I took a step back. "How did you find us?" "His energy is like a road flare." My brain waffled between making sense of what she'd said and the girl we'd hit. What? How? Wait, were you in the road just now? "Yes, please. He's with Jolene. You have to save her." The spirit turned and headed deeper into the forest. Aaron climbed out the driver's side window.
Let's go.
"Your head. Stay here. I'll heal when I shift."
Bullshit. He's armed.
Aaron swooned and motioned for me to go.
Follow her. I'll be right behind you.
Chapter 49. I flew above the treetops with my eyes locked on the spirit below, but my preternatural senses focused on the growing gap between the Firebird and Aaron's energy, as well as the location of Bryson's hawk. One made injured, the other too far away to help. It was up to me to find Jolene. Christina stopped and pointed straight ahead. Scanning the ground, I circled twice before I spotted the rusted rooftop. I'd assumed Walt would have Jolene outdoors. No matter how dilapidated the building, the cover limited my options. I'd need to lure him away from the girl before I could incinerate him. I dove toward the shack and landed on the metal roof with a heavy thud. Something moved inside. No voices. I threw my head back and screeched. The whimper of a child tightened my chest. She's still alive. I flew to a low branch to get a better look at the structure. One door and one window. I could smoke them out, but not without risking Jolene's safety. Then again, every second I wasted did just that. Judging from the condition of the wood, the place would go up in no time, not to mention the piles of dried pine needles covering the ground and the roof. The metal roof. The metal roof that wouldn't burn. I caught movement in my periphery and turned to find Aaron approaching with his gun drawn. Chirping twice to get his attention, I extended my wing and hoped he'd recognize the gesture as stop. He nodded once and stepped behind a tree. I launched into the air, circled back, and dove low. A few yards from the shack, I released my magic and let my feathers burn bright. The Firebird skimmed her flaming wing across the roof to ignite the pine needles and leaves. Leaving a trail of fire in my path, I flew low to the ground and created a wall of flames to prevent Walt from running in any direction except straight to Aaron. I pulled my magic back and waited. And waited. And waited. No one came out of the building. At the end of my patience, I flew skyward and barrel rolled toward the metal roof. This time when I landed, it groaned like thunder under my weight. The front door opened. I eased back and crouched low. I'd fry him as soon as he stepped away from the entrance.
Walter Bingham, on the ground, hands behind your head.
Aaron stepped away from the tree with his weapon raised. A gun fired, and I dove for the man. I hit him between the shoulders, sending him to the ground. The Firebird's mouth watered at the scent of fresh blood. While I saw a monster, she saw easy prey.
Get Jojo.
Aaron rushed forward and slammed his knee down on Walt's back. Shifting to human form, I turned for the shack. Dirty, scared, but alive, Jolene stared at me from the back corner. I lifted her into my arms and carried her outside. She coughed several times, but otherwise showed no reaction. Had she not tracked me with her gaze, I would have thought she'd gone into a catatonic state. I fell to my knees in front of her and unbound her hands and feet. Every piece of me wanted to pull her into my arms and hug the daylights out of her. But I was afraid to touch her. Are you hurt? She stared past me.
You have the right to remain silent.
Aaron read Walt his rights while he cuffed his hands behind his back. It's going to be okay, baby girl. He can't hurt you anymore. I placed my hands on her shoulders. Look at me. Are you hurt?
Is she all right?
Aaron stood and pulled out his phone. I think so. I hoped so. But we had no way of knowing what she'd endured. She still wore her little Bruce Springsteen costume, had no obvious bruises, no blood, but her haunted expression terrified me.
Do something about the blaze before it gets out of control,
Aaron shouted. The fire I'd started burned brighter around us, but Jolene continued to stare at the men. I put my face in front of hers. I need to put this out before it gets out of control. Stay right here. She stared as if she hadn't heard me, nodded, and returned her gaze to Aaron and Walt. My heart ached for her. She'd progressed into a happy, healthy little girl in her short time with us. I couldn't begin to imagine what that piece of shit had done to her, but at the very least, he'd scared her silent. I brushed her hair from her face. I'll be right back. A hint of a smile lit her beautiful blue eyes, and my world righted itself. Keeping an eye on the child, I walked through the flames, absorbing them into my skin as I moved. I gave her a quick nod and rounded the corner to extinguish the fire behind the shack. Bryson's magic caressed me as he flew overhead. He cried out, circled once, and headed in the direction of Aaron's car. The gunshot stopped me dead. Much like the sinking feeling I'd experienced earlier that day, my entire body went numb. Had we missed something? Was there a second perp? Jolene. Oh my God. Was she okay? I'd left her again. I ran to the front of the shack. It took my brain a few beats to make sense of the sight before me. Jolene stood over Walter Bingham with a gun in her hands. Aaron stood a few feet away with tears streaming down his face. I stood, staring, unsure what to say or do. My feet refused to move forward. She'd committed murder. Or had she? Which girl had pulled the trigger? She dropped the gun and backed away from the body. My brain kicked into gear. Is that your service weapon? Aaron shook his head. Walt's gun. She shot him in the back with his own gun. Oh, God. Bryson broke through the tree line, took in the scene, and scooped Jolene into his arms.
Jojo, is that you?
The girl said, I had to do it. My knees threatened to buckle. We're going to lose her. Chapter 50. Bryson set the child on the ground and knelt before her.
Christina?
She threw herself against his chest. Yes, I'm sorry. I had to do it. I had to protect her from him." She motioned to Aaron. "And her father. It's my job. It's the only way." The detective snatched the gun from the ground.
The only way to what?
Bryson held her hands. Sobbing, she shook her head. "Forget it. You won't understand." "What are you doing?" I rushed toward Aaron as he fired the weapon into Walt's body. The forest went still. He dropped the gun.
I can't let Jolene take the blame for this.
Bryson stood.
Think about what you're saying.
I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly very aware of my bare skin. "Your promotion. Hell, this could end your career." Aaron held his hands out at his sides.
She's my daughter. I'd give my life to spare her more trauma.
Bryson touched my shoulder.
People are coming. You need to go.
"No. Give me your shirt." I wouldn't abandon them. Not now. Aaron smiled, a resigned smile that still managed to light his eyes, and I knew we wouldn't change his mind. He'd spoken the truth when he said he'd laid down his life for Jolene. "Okay. Call home and tell me where to meet you." I shifted into the Firebird and alighted on a branch above the scene. Bryson turned to Aaron.
Uncuff him and listen to me.
Aaron did as he was told. Bryson lifted the girl into his arms.
His car's parked not too far from where you went off the road. We wrecked while in pursuit. I was unconscious. You hit your head. Likely have a concussion, but you followed the suspect. The place was on fire when you got here. There was a struggle. You secured his weapon. He went for the girl and you fired. Twice?
Aaron ran his hand over the back of his head.
Yes, twice.
Bryson turned to go.
There's a creek nearby. I'm going to dunk her in it to remove the gunpowder residue from her clothing.
Aaron's mouth fell open. "What do we tell them when they ask why she's wet?"
You don't know because she ran off and I chased after her.
I chirped my agreement. It was a crazy plan, but it just might work. Bryson pointed at me and to the sky.
Go.
I hung around while Aaron gave his initial statement to the uniformed officers. He repeated Bryson's words almost verbatim, though he added one detail.
Jolene's my biological daughter.
On the way home, I finished the job I'd inadvertently started when I rose from the dead. I torched the heck out of Aaron's unmarked police car and, hopefully, any incriminating evidence. I met my family in the emergency department an hour later. Bryson and Jolene shared a room, while Aaron was next door with the chief and Samuels. I pulled the sliding door closed behind me. "How's it going?" He stood and embraced me.
As well as can be expected. He should have stuck to the script.
The truth would have come out sooner or later. I smiled at the girl in the bed, though I had no idea if the patient was Jolene or Christina. "How are you feeling?" She shrugged. Bryson released me and handed her a notepad and pen. Evidently, Christina had left. "Have the doctors been in?" Jolene wrote a happy face and, "Yes, we get to go home soon." Bryson resumed his spot next to her on the bed.
No signs of trauma. Any type.
She nudged his side and motioned for him to continue.
And we agreed she would decide when she felt ready to tell us what happened.
I sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. While the emotional trauma would take time and patience to heal, we were lucky. Things could have been so much worse. I think that sounds like a very good idea. Samuels rapped on the glass door.
Lamar, do you have a minute?
Sure, 1 sec. I gave them each a kiss and walked into the hall. What's on your mind, Detective? He pulled me away from the door.
Would you mind telling me what really happened?
I don't know. I wasn't there. I smiled as bright as a pageant queen.
No little birdies told you?
The corner of his mouth twitched. Nope. The chief walked out of Aaron's room, took one look at me, and frowned.
Lamar, I need a word with you.
Oh, crap. He wouldn't fire me in the emergency department hallway, would he? Sure thing. He folded his arms.
I understand you had a conflict of interest in the Wagner case?
No, I was never on the Wagner case. I gave him the same blinding smile I'd given Samuels. And, actually, sir, Aaron made a point not to come around my property while Jolene was there until after she was eliminated as a suspect.
So I've heard, but he continued to work the Wagner and the Bingham cases after he had confirmation of the child's paternity.
It's a good thing he did. Otherwise, we'd be visiting his daughter in a funeral home instead of here. My face hurt from holding my lips back so long. I motioned to Jolene's room. Have you met her?
I don't need to meet the girl.
He folded his arms. I took his hand and tugged him to the glass door. Jolene glanced up and waved. Imagine what the media will say about this one. Detective saves girl and learns she's his long-lost daughter. And look at that face. How can he deny her? They have the same big blue eyes. It took a lot to surprise the salty police chief, but I'd managed to do it. He lowered his voice.
You're not suggesting we lie to the media?
I pressed my hand to my chest. No, sir. I'm suggesting you give them the facts.
What exactly are the facts?
He narrowed his eyes. Samuels muttered under his breath.
Careful, Lamar.
I leaned closer to the chief. The department ruined that little girl's life by letting it get out she confessed to killing her stepfather. Are you aware she's being homeschooled because her former teachers are afraid to have her in class? The light bulb of understanding flickered above his head.
I see.
I'm aware she confessed, but anyone with eyes could see that a 4-foot-nothing little girl couldn't have taken down a man the size of Ben Wagner with a pair of scissors. I'd hate to think what a jury would do with such a case. His eyes narrowed until I wondered if he could see me at all.
Are you threatening me, Lamar?
No, sir. I'm giving you the facts. He took a step back.
I'll see you in 3 to 6 months.
I should have known better than to go up against the man. Snapping my mouth shut, I asked, "You're suspending me?" He clamped his hand on my shoulder hard enough to make me wince.
Not this time. I assumed you'd request the same family leave as Burns. You two are still engaged.
Oh. He was giving me maternity leave for a 9-year-old? I hadn't thought about it, honestly. He shook his head.
Marry the guy. He's going to need all the help he can get raising that little girl.
Yes, sir. I'll take that as an order. The chief turned and walked away. Samuel stepped back and looked me over. What? He smirked.
I'm wondering where you keep those giant balls of yours.
I'll never tell. I leaned against the wall. How much trouble is Aaron in? He gave me his go-to move, a shrug.
Ask him.
I left the detective in the hall and slipped into Aaron's room. Hey,
Hey yourself.
he lifted his arm.
Come here.
What'd the doctors say? I snuggled beside him.
Concussion. They wanted to keep me overnight, but I talked them out of it.
Is that wise? I turned my face toward his.
Probably not, but I've lost 9 years with her. I don't want to miss another day.
He brushed his lips across mine.
How is she? Have you seen her?
She's silent again, but there are no injuries or signs of abuse. He turned his face toward heaven and closed his eyes.
Thank God. How long do you think it'll take before I can be a real father to her?
You are a real father.
You know what I mean.
I did. We had a spirit to deal with, and Jolene needed time to recover before he could step into the role full time. We have a heart-to-heart with Christina Hayes and Jolene. Chapter 51. My little family gathered around the kitchen table. Jolene had chosen the chair between me and Bryson, and Aaron sat to my right. We'd reserved the seat at the head of the table for our special guest. Aaron held the blue bottle to the light and watched as the shadow form moved inside.
You sure about this?
Jojo played with the protection amulet around her neck and nodded. I lit the candles in the center of the table. Ready? We held hands, and the adults said in unison, Christina Hayes, we summon your spirit into our presence. Hear our call. We beseech you. Come. The flames flickered. We turned to Jolene, but she shook her head. Christina Hayes, we summon your spirit into our presence. Hear our call. We beseech you. Come. The spirit materialized in the empty chair. This is it. You're going to banish me like you did Ben? Jojo closed her eyes tight and shook her head. Aaron whispered,
She shouldn't be here.
I squeezed his hand. They've been friends a long time. She belongs here. Christina laughed, loud and shrill. You still haven't figured it out. I covered my nose and mouth to keep the sickening perfume out and repeated her words for Bryson's sake. We haven't figured what out? Forget it. She tried to rise, but the spells we'd woven before the ritual kept her in place. What the fuck? Let me go. We can't until we talk. I motioned to Jolene. Would you like to tell her? Jojo pushed her notebook away and dipped her chin. We're best friends. You and me. I've protected you from those other ghosts. We've been through a lot. Christina cooed to the girl. Aaron tightened his jaw but remained blessedly quiet. Hoping to keep the tension at a minimum as long as possible, I spoke in a calm, even tone. You've been a very good friend to her, and you've been through a lot together. But there's something you should know about the shadows. Jolene chewed her lower lip. The spirit glared. What about them? I pointed toward the ceiling. Look, there's more. Many more. So? Where do you think they come from? Why are you asking me? You're the freaking ghost whisperer or something. She stared at the wall. Jolene told me what they are. She's actually far better at communicating with the dead than I am. Christina whipped her head toward Jolene. What did you tell her? The girl shrank back. Bryson pulled her against his side. I pressed my hand to my stomach to settle the growing unease. She told me they're shadow forms. Do you know what that means?" The spirit huffed like I was the most ignorant adult who had ever walked the earth. "We all have them. They are the dark parts of us, the parts that we're ashamed of, the parts we keep hidden from almost everyone, sometimes even ourselves." "Where did you pick that up? New Agers Anonymous?" I ignored her comment and motioned to the ceiling. "There are more because you're ashamed of what happened to Jolene. You believe it was your fault." She slammed her hands on the table hard enough to rattle it, even in her weakened state. "That's bull." I glanced at Jolene. The girl met Christina's gaze and nodded. "You turned her against me?" I'd seen her expression before. Each time it had ended in violence. "No one turned her against you. I'm telling you the truth." Christina reached across the table for Jolene. "Remember what I told you about how we met?" The girl glanced at Aaron, then dipped her chin. "I saw you with your mom. She and Ben were happy. They were pushing you in a stroller. Then they saw him. I knew he was your real dad. I knew he'd hurt you like he did me." Aaron made a sound like something inside him broke. The spirit turned to him. "I followed you when they took my body out. Do you remember how my mom screamed? Her heart stopped beating after I died. But you knew that, didn't you?" Aaron curled his shoulders forward, as if her words had caused him physical pain. "I swore I'd make you pay for hurting us." He drew a shuddered breath.
I'll never forget that day, or what happened to you. But it wasn't me who hurt you. It was Walter Bingham.
The table rattled again. "Don't say that name. Don't you say it." I pointed at the ceiling again. "Look." The spirit folded her arms and stared straight ahead. Saliva pooled in my mouth. I'd vomit if the ghost didn't tone down her anger and the perfume.
Are you okay?
Bryson whispered. "I'll be okay. It's the Love's Baby Soft. It's making me sick to my stomach." The spirit tilted her head. "If it's making you queasy, we could do this another time. Preferably without him." Jolene motioned above Christina's head, but she refused to look. As much as I wanted to send her on her way and be done with it, my heart broke for the girl. She'd spent the previous decade confused and scared. We had to make her understand. "Christina, you'll never be free until you forgive yourself for the things you think you've done wrong. Why are there more shadow forms now? What are you hiding behind all that anger? Those are ghosts. They're not part of me. You felt it when I touched them." She shook her head. Jolene grabbed the bottle, ripped the top off, and emptied the inky substance into her hand. Christina's spine stiffened. "Put it back. They'll hurt you." Jolene made a fist, and Christina gasped. Aaron touched my hand and nodded toward the ceiling. The shadow forms swirled like a tornado above the spirit. I whispered, "Jojo, let it go." She looked from me to the darkness and shook her head. Likely sensing danger, Bryson glanced around.
What's happening? The shadows are merging together.
Aaron pushed back from the table. Bryson set his palm on Jolene's arm. His magic washed over the girl in a haze of golden light. I turned back to the spirit. "I don't know what's happening, But I'm scared for you. Please, tell us the truth. What are you so ashamed of?" Christina's form flickered in and out, and she turned her face toward the ceiling. "Help me, Jojo. Please, help me." "Tell them," Jolene pleaded. Her voice broke. "I'm so tired. I know it's time for me to rest, but I can't. I'm stuck here. I thought if I killed him, I'd be free. You have to forgive yourself. What are you holding back?" I drew a ball of magic into my palm and offered it to the girl, but the shadow forms latched onto it. Before I could close my hand, they'd siphoned a considerable amount of my energy. "When the man in the blue, when Walter Bingham took me, I'd snuck out. I was supposed to meet a boy, but I was grounded. Oh, Christina, you did nothing to deserve what happened to you. Nothing." Despite the revelation, the shadows grew darker and thicker. I feared they'd consume her before she found peace. "What else do you need to get off your chest?" The shadows descended around her. Jolene screamed and lurched for the spirit, but Bryson caught the girl around the waist. Christina's voice rang out through the room. "It's my fault Jolene's mother married Ben. I whispered how awful Aaron was to her night and day. I told her he'd hurt them both. Then I saw what he did for Jolene, how he took the blame for me shooting Walter Bingham. He should have been her dad. She wouldn't have suffered so long." Aaron and Jolene looked as shocked as me. Thankfully, the girl had words when the adults did not. "I forgive you, but my mama couldn't hear you. She never heard my grandma or any of the others." Jolene wiped her eyes. "It's not your fault. And I have my daddy now, 2 of them." Christina broke free of the spells holding her in the chair. She levitated 3 feet above the table, and the shadow forms encased her. One by one, the pieces of herself she'd refused to acknowledge disappeared inside her until her body solidified. Bryson whispered,
I can see her.
"What's happening?" Jolene stretched her hand toward the spirit.
Don't touch her.
Aaron, Bryson, and I said. Jolene had the good graces to grin before ignoring us. She grabbed Christina's hand and lit up like an angel atop a Christmas tree. The spirit stared at the ceiling as if awestruck. "It's beautiful. I can see it. I can see heaven. My mom, she's there. I love you, Christina." Jojo's voice cracked, and she released the spirit's hand. White light filled the room. When it faded, Christina Hayes had gone. "Excuse me." I bolted for the bathroom. Chapter 52. After a long shower and 2 rounds with my toothbrush, I'd rejoined the land of the living. Curled up in my favorite corner of the couch, I pulled the quilt to my chin. The perfume got to me. I'm okay now. Bryson and Aaron exchanged glances. We have more important things to discuss than my weak stomach. Jolene snuggled in beside me. "Can I go first? It's important." My already worn-out gut clenched. While we needed to know what happened to her, I'd expected it to take weeks or months before she felt up to telling us. "Sure, baby girl. You first." She chewed her lower lip. Bryson took a seat in the chair across from the couch.
Nothing you say will change how much we love you.
Aaron plopped down beside us.
He's right. We're a family, and families stick together no matter what.
She glanced between us. Okay, here goes. I hate beauty pageants. I coughed to cover my laughter. Bryson gave me a warning look and leaned closer.
Because of what happened?
The girl shook her head so fast her braids flew out to the sides. I've always hated them.
Why?
Aaron furrowed his brow. Christina liked them. Jolene dipped her chin. I liked the dancing part, but I mess up without the ghosts helping me. The detective bit his lip. I wasn't the only one who found the conversation amusing. Our mate, on the other hand, wore a concerned expression. Bryson rested his elbows on his knees.
You don't have to be perfect. All we ask is that you practice and do your best.
Jolene's chin quivered. Yes, sir. Her reaction seemed to stun the big guy.
I'm not saying you have to do pageants. If you hate them, then that's that.
I rubbed the girl's back. Do you want to continue dance and voice lessons? I'd rather draw and play with TJ. She flashed me a bashful smile. I understood. She'd spent most of her childhood in dance studios and working with pageant coaches. You just want to be a kid. Yes, ma'am. And I want to do art. She tilted her head. Is that okay? Of course it's okay. I gave her shoulder a little shake. I wouldn't admit it out loud, but I loved the idea of never setting foot backstage at another pageant. Right, guys?
Absolutely.
Aaron seemed as relieved as me. I could practically see the wheels turning in Bryson's head. The big guy seriously needed to lighten up. He sat back and rubbed his chin.
Jolene, which one of you did the singing?
Her cheeks turned pink. Christina? Huh. I thought back to what the spirit said about begging Jolene to take off her necklace after she was kidnapped, and Bryson texting something was wrong with her voice. It all made sense. Mumbling, Jojo shifted her weight. It was wrong to let them help me cheat, but the ghosts can't do my drawings. Bryson met my gaze and winked.
Art it is, then. I'll make room for you in the studio. Possibly build an addition to expand the workspace.
Oh, no, not until you finish our bedroom and second bath. I poked Jolene's side. You have 2 women in the house now. We need a giant bathtub. And bubbles. The girl giggled.
I have a few months off. I'll help get it done.
Aaron rested his arm on the back of the couch. He hadn't looked so relaxed in weeks. Oh, I'll be right back. Jolene hopped up and ran into her bedroom. Aaron squeezed my shoulder.
How are you feeling?
Better. My stomach roiled as if to remind me it was anything but better. He flashed me his world-famous sheepish grin, the one that had photographers clamoring to sign him up for the OCPD Hot Cops calendar every spring.
I'd ask if you were pregnant, but you just had your period.
Bryson half coughed and half choked. Aaron glanced between us.
What am I missing?
Seriously, these 2. I glared at Bryson. Laugh it up. He sat back grinning like he owned the world.
Tessa used the oldest excuse in the book to smooth things over with the chief. Oh.
Aaron ran his index finger over his lower lip. I tossed a pillow at him. How did you not know that? It was the night in the woods. His eyes widened, and he shot Bryson a look. The two stared, doing their silent bro conversation. When they'd finished, they turned and stared. "Don't look at me like that. I told you, the perfume got to me, and the stress, and I haven't eaten a thing since yesterday."
Yeah, that has to be it.
Aaron ran his hand over the back of his neck. Thankfully, Jolene returned to the room and put an end to the nonsense. She stopped in front of Aaron and held out her hand. "Here." She dropped one of Grandma's rose-shaped soaps in his palm.
What's this for?
He sniffed it. She gave him the same look I had when he'd used the P word. "It's to keep the spirits away." I sat up straighter.
Thanks.
He tossed the soap into the air and caught it several times before dropping it into his pocket.
It'll make me smell good, too.
I made a mental note to find more masculine-scented soaps to bespell. I couldn't have my detective running around solving murders smelling like roses. The house phone rang, and I pushed myself to my feet. Bryson stood.
Stay put. I'll get it.
Jolene retrieved her sketch pad from the desk and sat on the floor beside the coffee table. Aaron and I watched in wonder as she drew the outline of a face. Lost in concentration, she leaned closer to the paper and shaded what would become the nose and mouth. Aaron toyed with my hair, but his gaze remained on the paper.
She doesn't get that from me. I can't manage a stick figure.
Enjoying the feel of his fingers on my scalp, I closed my eyes. "I get the spirits from you, Daddy." His hand froze.
I only recently started seeing them.
Jolene turned and gave him a patient smile, the kind she gave TJ when he acted like a brute. "They've always been there. You just didn't know about them. Kind of like me."
Kind of like you,
Aaron whispered.
Jojo. Now that I have you in my life, I'm not letting you go.
Bryson's voice rose in the other room, but I was far more interested in the conversation taking place before me. I'd wondered why Aaron had suddenly developed the ability to see spirits. It hadn't come from the magic Bryson had shared with him. The Nunnehi had never possessed the gift. "I know." She leaned closer to the paper. The tip of her tongue moved from one corner of her mouth to the other as she worked. Aaron gave me a questioning look. I shrugged and curled against his side. "This is nice. The four of us spending a quiet night at home." Bryson plopped down in his chair.
That was a reporter from Channel 9. She wants to do an interview with Aaron and Jolene. Absolutely not.
He squeezed my shoulder.
Nothing good can come of it, and we could all use some peace and quiet.
"The publicity might help you with the promotion." I couldn't help but smile at his exasperated expression and the fact the phone call would prove my point to the chief should he change his mind and fire us.
I don't care about the promotion. My focus is on making sure this little girl is legally mine.
Jolene handed Aaron her sketch. The paper shook in his hands. I sat up to get a look at the likeness of an older woman with kind eyes. "Who is it?" "It's my grandma." Jolene tilted her head and examined her handiwork. "It's almost done. I forgot to add her freckles." I assumed she'd drawn Jenny's mother, but, judging from the glisten in Aaron's eyes, I was wrong.
It's my mom.
He spoke without taking his eyes off the page.
It looks just like her, Jojo. Thank you.
The girl glanced past Aaron and nodded. "It won't be quiet around here for long."
Why do you say that?
Bryson stood to get a better look at the image. The girl shrugged. "Charlie says babies are noisy." Epilogue. Autumn in Florida meant less rain, less humidity, less heat, and the prettiest blue skies in the country. It's when we turned off the air conditioners and opened the windows and spent long afternoons outdoors. Today was no exception. I sat at my handmade vanity in the new master bedroom that Bryson and Aaron had built. A breeze blew across my bare neck, cooling both my out-of-control hormones and my nerves. As usual these days, I was running behind schedule. We hadn't had a wedding on the property since I was a little girl. Thankfully, my guys had insisted we hire help for the big day, and, to my surprise, Grandma had agreed without a fight. "Tessa Marie, take him so I can get into my dress. It's almost time." Darlene handed me Cole, my new baby brother. I had two choices, stand or set him on top of my growing belly. I stood. "Mama, they aren't going to start without us." Darlene wiggled her way into the tightest dress I'd ever laid eyes on. She'd insisted that she'd lose the baby weight in time for the big day, but hadn't quite hit the mark. "Oh, for the love of Pete! I can't get the zipper!" I set Cole in his carrier and turned to wedge my mother into the dress. It took a wire hanger in my teeth and both hands tugging, but I managed to get it zipped. "Hold still. Let me fasten the hook and eye." She sucked in short gasps of air. "That little bit of metal isn't going to prevent a wardrobe malfunction. Trade me dresses." "What? No?" I backed away from her. "There's no way that's going to fit over my tummy." She set her hands on her hips. "Tessa Marie, I'm your mama. I'm old and fat. I need that dress. Take it off." I resisted the urge to roll my eyes and stomp my foot, the way Jolene had taken to doing with her father's. "Why you bought a new dress when you've had your eye on Dottie's gown since you were knee-high to a grasshopper, I'll never know. You know you'll never forgive yourself if you don't wear it." I did love the dress Dottie had worn to marry Charlie. I'd gone back and forth between a new gown and the old one for weeks, but decided to play it safe with pale blue flowing chiffon. "Fine. It's probably more appropriate for you to wear blue anyway. And you should wear ivory." She reached behind her, and the seam of her gown split from armpit to hip. Her eyes widened and her mouth fell open. I froze, unsure if I should duck for cover or make a run for it with my little brother. Darlene made a sound in her throat and bit her lip. A half-second later, she erupted in a fit of giggles. "Mama, are you okay?" I'd seen people in movies burst out laughing before they suffered psychotic breaks. Given the amount of stress the wedding had put on her, I wouldn't put it past her to go on a killing spree before eating the 4-tiered raspberry-filled cake. She laughed harder. "I'm so happy Stone and I eloped. Could you imagine if this were my day? I'm already a nervous wreck. I wish I could have been there with you." It had upset me when they came back from Vegas married, but I understood. In fact, I was second-guessing my decision to have a family wedding. It was my 4th time down the aisle. 5th, I deadpanned. Darlene stepped out of the ruined gown. 4th? It doesn't count if you divorce and remarry the same man. Turn around. Let me help you with those buttons. Are you two almost ready? The boys are getting restless out there." Grandma poked her head into the room. "Lord in heaven, what happened?" "Wardrobe malfunction," Darlene and I said before cracking up. Grandma jutted her chin forward. "Tessa Marie, you best not let me find out you've been drinking. I don't care if it is your wedding day. I haven't, I promise. But could you get Dottie's dress from the closet in the office? I would have gone myself, but I could sense Bryson and Aaron milling about in the living room. Darlene slid the pretty, but not really my style, dress over her shoulders, and I fastened the buttons down the back. Dottie came in through the mudroom door. My stars, Tessa, why are you still in your undies? We've had a change of plans. I'm going to wear your dress. Seeing her all gussied up on my special day made everything feel too real. I reached behind me and grabbed the vanity. She rushed forward. Are you all right? I nodded, though I could no longer deny the hollow spot in my chest. I still can't believe he's not here to walk me down the aisle. He's here in his own way. She patted my shoulder. I'm thrilled you'll be wearing my dress when you marry Bryson and Aaron. May it bring you as much happiness as it did me and Charlie. Graham May hurried into the room with the garment bag. Here it is, but we don't have time to press it. It's perfect. I ran my hand over the antique lace. I just hope it fits. 15 minutes later, I peeked out the living room window at the yard full of friends and family. The spirit tree blocked my view of the altar and made it impossible to catch more than a glimpse of my grooms. My great-grandmother fastened the veil beneath my curls. You look beautiful. Remember to breathe. Thanks, Graham. Holding back tears, I embraced her. Like most little girls, I'd dreamt of my wedding day. As I grew into a woman, I swore I'd never get married. Yet here I stood, in Dottie's dress, flowers in hand, and veil in place. I'd hug you, but I'd end up ruining my makeup. Darlene shoved a bouquet of hydrangeas and white roses into my hand and opened the front door. I'll see you at the altar. Dottie ushered Jolene and TJ toward the door. All right, TJ, you're up. Do I have to wear the tie? It's choking me. He pulled at the collar of his tuxedo and made gagging sounds. Jolene set her hand on her hip. Yes, until after the ceremony. Besides, you look handsome in your tux. The boy stood a solid inch taller. You look pretty, too. You look pretty. Dottie escorted him to the porch. Go, but don't run. TJ walked down the path like he worked a runway. Jolene twirled, sending cream-colored tulle and icy blue ribbons out around her. I bent down and embraced her. You look pretty. Bryson did a good job on your hair. Thank you. You look like a princess, Mommy. All righty. It's time for the flower girl to walk down the aisle and the bride to take her place outside. Dottie's grin reminded me of Christmas mornings. She'd worn the same expression every year when she handed me a special gift. Jolene and I walked to the porch. I'd expected my heart to pound or my palms to sweat, but none of that happened. More than anything, I was ready to say my vows, kiss my grooms, and start our lives together. The girl stared past me and smiled. Hi, Charlie.
Hi, Jojo.
His voice rang in my ears as clear as the others around me. I stiffened, afraid to turn and find that I'd imagined it. Dottie whispered, Jolene, it's your turn. Don't forget to sprinkle the petals. A hand rested on my shoulder.
I always knew you'd wear that dress one day, but you're more beautiful than I could have imagined.
My heart beat like a ceremonial drum, clear, loud and fast. I glanced at Dottie, who stared behind me. Is he? Her entire face lit. Yes. You didn't think he'd let you walk down the aisle alone, did you? I whirled around and everything stilled. Charlie, my grandfather, smiled.
Hello, little flame.
The porch tilted, but he set his hand on my waist to steady me.
Easy now.
His laughter filled the empty places inside me that had formed the day he'd died. You're almost solid. I glanced at my family and grooms. Can they see you?
Some can, some can't.
He hooked his arm in mine and squared his shoulders.
We shouldn't keep your man waiting.
I wanted to pull him inside the house and spend the afternoon talking like we used to. I wanted to hear his corny jokes and his old stories and his laughter. I wanted to lock him away and never let him leave me again. I'm not ready. Can we sit on the swing for a bit? I hardly recognized my voice. The airy quality of it reminded me of my mother, Achila. He turned his head and met my gaze.
It is time for you to marry. We'll have plenty of opportunities to talk soon. I promise.
I could have stared into his deep brown eyes for hours, but I knew he was right. I had kept Bryson and Aaron waiting long enough. The first step is the hardest. Take it with intention and never look back. Dottie kissed my cheek and hurried to take her seat. Charlie chuckled.
I told her that on our wedding day.
I glanced between them, and a flood of memories threatened to sweep me away. But that's all they were. Moments I'd already lived. Sweet pieces of the puzzle that made me. I glanced over the crowd. Everyone I loved waited for me to take the first step. Jolene, my sweet girl. Haley and Scott with their son. Dottie and Dr. Alexander. Stone with my new baby brother. Lulu Rose holding Tank's hand. Members of the tribe, including the elders, had come, along with every cousin in the family tree. My gaze fell on my grooms, Aaron to the right, Bryson to the left. Aaron grinned like he'd won a blue ribbon at the county fair, while Bryson dipped his chin and swallowed hard. The future stretched out before me, along with new moments that would shape me into the woman I would become. I took a deep breath and stepped forward.
This has been part 4 of The Spirit Child, Tessa Lamar Novels, Book 3. Written by Kathryn M. Hearst. Narrated by Holly Adams. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please subscribe to Kathryn's channel where you can find more of Kathryn's paranormal and contemporary romance novels.